This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation is still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, all back. We have not been together, all four of us, since July.
Exactly. I don't know where Lisa's been. I mean, she's been, all
talk about tanned and rested.
I know, ready to go. All set to go.
She's publishing. She's a sabbatical. She's publishing in late October. Where were you? What'd you do? You okay?
Yeah, Bahamas. Did a little
Harbor
family
Island,
vacation.
you and Oprah.
Me and Oprah. I was hanging out with her.
Let me guess, the weather was perfect.
It was nice. It was beautiful, sunshine, a little clouds toward the end, but I can't complain.
Yeah. How were the children? Children mostly well behaved.
Yes. They were okay, but we did a lot of excursions. So my bank account is wiped. That's it.
We got to get right there. We got to stop the show. Is there a Costco on Harbor Island in the Bahamas?
That affected my Costco budget this vacation. So we'll see how that goes.
I said this weekend, Paul. Paul does more to the travel than all of us. It's no fun traveling anymore. It's so damn expensive.
It's expensive, and it's just everybody's out there. So my strategy is I'm only getting on a plane when somebody pays me to get on the plane.
When Capuano comes in here from Bonvoy Marriott, whatever he's running, can we lock the door and not let him out until we get decent rates? Anyways, the travel. We hope you had a great summer. We are back and ready for a powerful September, end of quarter, September 30. Paula, what are you looking for in the markets here near record highs?
I mean, you're pulling back in the market here a little bit. Futures off about 0.5% on the S&P 500, Tom. But if you pull up your Go function on the Bloomberg terminal, there's a lot of economic data coming out this week. We got some payroll stuff at the end of the week here. We got some ISM data coming out towards today, and then later in the week. So there's a lot of economic data coming out here today that presumably will inform this Federal Reserve as they think about their September meeting.
For Global Wall Street, my benchmark is a 10-year real yield 1.75%, a little bit elevated off the lower yields that we saw later last week. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. That's all I can say. It's a single best way to help Lisa Mateo. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Good morning. On Android Auto and Apple CarPlay as well. For the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Let's see if I remember how to do this. All right, futures in the red right now. This is after the holiday shortened trading week, so we'll see how it goes. NASDAQ futures down 0.7%, 137 points. Dow futures down 0.4%, 203 points. S&P futures down 0.5% or 29 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.93%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.91%, and that is little change. To currency, the dollar extended modest gains right now. We have the Japanese yen rallied. Bank of Japan governor said the central bank will continue to raise interest rates if the economy and prices perform as expected. Right now, Japanese yen up 0.6%, 146.02 against the dollar. We have the euro, British pound weaker. Bitcoin right now up about 0.1% at 59,000. Shares of U.S. Steel down about 6%. Vice President Kamala Harris joined President Joe Biden saying that the company should remain domestically owned and operated. And other companies making news. You have DirecTV failed to reach a new distribution deal with Disney. Because of that, over the weekend, it caused more than 11 million of its subscribers to lose access to channels like ESPN and ABC. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Let's get adjusted here. We're gonna do Forex here coming up, and of course the markets and all that. But now on the American economy with Nationwide, Kathleen Best-Johnsick joins us, their chief economist. Kathleen, how distant, how far, how close are we to recession?
Good morning, Tom. Well, recession is not in the cards anytime soon. Certainly still the risks are there, the vulnerability. I think, we'll get more information this week. As you mentioned, we'll get really the payroll number, I think, looms large here because employment is going to dictate not, if the Fed cuts rates, but by how much. To me, I think it's really employment that helps fine-tune that degree. And the slower the Fed is to cut rates, the higher, recession odds remain. But for now,
Right.
growth for the current quarter, we see it coming in around 2%. So that's very solid.
I was on the edge of Alan Meltzer here saying, I just can't frame out 50 beeps. It's just too dramatic for an undramatic Fed. Is 50 beeps just drifted away?
Well, I think for September, that's a large hurdle for the Fed. They've communicated pretty clearly that they want to start out with small increments and be cautious. But I wouldn't rule out 50, anytime, the remaining meetings after that, right? We've got Fed meetings in November and December. And again, I think it depends on employment. If employment remains solid, I would suspect our baseline is they do 25 basis points each of the 3 meetings this year.
Like how he did that 50 beeps.
Yeah,
Sounds like you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Hey, Kathy, talk to us about the U.S. consumer. I just spent the Labor Day weekend in the Jersey Shore. The Jersey Shore dives are packed. The restaurants are packed. How's the consumer out there?
Overall, the consumer is remaining pretty firm here, and great to hear you're at the Jersey Shore. That's where I grew up, so great area.
Perfect.
That explains a lot, Kathleen, right there.
I'm a New Yorker now, but I grew up on the Jersey Shore. We found out on Friday consumer spending in real terms was quite vibrant. And again, that's really the backbone of the GDP growth in the third quarter. Really strong real consumer spending, up 0.4 on the month of July. But the but is the savings rate fell to 2.9%. So for consumers to continue spending at that pretty strong pace, they had to drive the savings rate lower. So there's not a lot of excess, cushion there for the consumer. Personal income was only up in real terms up 0.2. So there's the problem, right? And at some point, that lack of savings could be a problem if we see employment growth slow and income growth slow. Then consumers going to have to pull back. But for now, pretty strong pace that we see.
And Kathy, the unemployment rate popped up above 4%. I don't know if that's because, there's some difficulty out there in the labor market, or there's just more people out there. How do you think about the labor market?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I would say as of late, it's because, and we'll get job openings this week as well, right? And it's because job openings and demand for workers have ebbed a bit. There also is a supply, more people coming into the labor force. We saw that particularly a few months ago. Some of that's immigration. Some of it's also because the overall economy is getting a little tougher and people are having to come back in. Sometimes it's even for part-time or second jobs. So we'll see. I think, along with payrolls, I would say the JOLTS number, that those job openings will really loom large. We're at a point now, though, before the Fed could kind of skim and lower the job openings number and the unemployment rate didn't rise. Now you're at the point where job openings decline and demand declines for workers, the unemployment rate could rise.
What does the trade dynamic look like? I mean, off the edge of the equation is net exports. We don't talk about it. We got China flat on their back. I got Germany flat on their back with a huge East German election this week. And Kathleen Smith-Johnson, what is the dynamic of our exports and our imports?
Yeah, great question, because...
It's okay, I go home. That's it for September. See ya, October 1st. Continue.
It's really a great question, because it's really the U.S. is leading the way here right now. We can't rely, as you said, on the rest of the world to help boost growth. China's really struggling. There were the hopes that they would, growth would come on track. That hasn't happened. And Europe is really also really kind of challenged here, and particularly Germany. And they have, even in the UK, they have constraints on the fiscal side. So they can't really boost growth that way. So it really comes down to the U.S. I think what we'll see is that we just don't get any extra help from the rest of the world. Import growth, I think, eventually will start to slow because the consumer pulls back. But for now, trade really we can't look for trade to be a source of growth for the U.S.
Kathy Machante, thank you so much. With Nationwide, great first conversation for the beginning of the business new year. It is September. With our news in New York City is Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa, outcry in Israel triggered by the brutal murders of 6 hostages in Gaza. Protesters came out in droves for the second straight day, hoping to pressure Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu into a ceasefire deal. But Netanyahu is refusing to budge, saying the pressure should be on Hamas, not Israel. Netanyahu asked the families of the hostages killed for forgiveness, but remained adamant that Israel will not be making additional concessions in the negotiations.
We're asked to make concessions? What message does this send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages.
President Joe Biden says Netanyahu needs to do more after nearly 11 months of fighting. Asked if he's talked to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu about a ceasefire deal and hostage release deal in Gaza.
We're still in negotiations, not with him, with my colleagues from Qatar and from Egypt.
Vice President Kamala Harris held Labor Day campaign events with union chiefs in 2 critical swing states, including a joint appearance with President Biden in Pennsylvania as she seeks to strengthen her standing with blue-collar workers. Speaking at a union local in Pittsburgh, Harris came out against the planned sale of United States Steel to a Japanese buyer.
I couldn't agree more with President Biden. U.S. Steel should remain American-owned and American-operated.
Meanwhile, former President Trump, who was off the campaign trail Monday, instead took to social media to attack Harris on the economy, saying all Americans are suffering during this holiday weekend. High gas prices, transportation costs are up, and grocery prices are through the roof. Cathay Pacific Airways' inspection of its Airbus SE A350 fleet is focused on deformed or degraded fuel lines in the engines of the wide-body aircraft. The discovery of the issue caused multiple flight cancellations as engineers switched out parts. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With the Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Yeah, I look at the football scores. Ole Miss, Furman, like 57-0, or
It's
whatever.
that kind of thing.
Notre Dame won and all that. The upset of the weekend, Boston College.
What happened? The Eagles beat the snot out of them?
In Florida.
Yeah.
In Florida. Beat
Tallahassee.
Florida State.
You talk, oh man, you talk about some droopy fans. They were just leaving like, I don't know what happened.
Florida
I'm
State
getting up
is
to speed.
0-2.
Yeah, Trevor Haas here from the Boston Globe in Bill O'Brien's debut, and Flutie's all wound up, and Matt Ryan. I mean, it's like my Ute.
I know. Boston College does a great win. I mean, but
They play, I can't pronounce it, but they play Duquesne's or
Duquesne's, okay. All right, coming up.
Duquesne,
There you go.
help me
Very
here.
good. Very
Oh,
good.
thank you, Ari. Duquesne's. I think I had to get a cleanse to say Duquesne. Anyways, very cool. Boston College with a huge win, NCAA. Speaking of which, 12 noon today, Joe Matthew.
Ringing it in. 12 noon, 92.9 FM Boston. For those of you in Washington, 99.1 in Washington. Of course, Bloomberg 1130 with a classic AM ginormous signal here in New York and now in Boston. Yeah, the 92.9 signal's big. It's going to be
It's
all over
huge.
New
From
England.
Mount Cotad. Got a lovely photo. Lisa got a photo from the National Hotel, Block Island. They'll be listening in. Good morning out on Block Island, a perfect autumnal day. So 12 noon today, Joe Matthew, Bloomberg Balance of Power, and we will be thrilled to be on 92.9 FM in Boston. Future's a little rocky here, -33. VIX out of stick, 16.57. From New York City, it's Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing. Call an Oppenheimer professional today. All right, we have futures falling. Investors awaiting this key jobs report on Friday could set the market tone for the rest of the year. The government will also issue figures on July job vacancies this week. Today, though, it kicks off with a read on U.S. manufacturing. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures down 0.7%, 143 points. Dow futures down 0.4%, 197 points. S&P futures down 0.5% or 29 points. Go over to commodities. We haven't checked in with that. Spot gold lower, $2,499 an ounce. We have Brent crude $75 a barrel. WTI crude $72 a barrel. Companies making news. Volkswagen, the company looking to close factories in Germany for the first time in its 87-year history in order to cut costs. And finally, sources say Goldman Sachs plans to dismiss a few hundred employees in the coming weeks, and that's part of its annual cutback for low-performing staff. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciated. Paul, I'm looking at the weekend box office here. I mean,
Really?
Deadpool is going to be the #1 movie to Christmas, right?
Yes, exactly.
Is that all there is Deadpool and Wolverine?
Alex Steele, huge Deadpool fan, so
Really?
she was all over. She was at like the first opening night. And everything,
I'm
so.
fascinated. I have no idea, folks. I'm speaking uninformed. Dennis Quaid attempts the unattemptable. He's going to be Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
They're going to do
I'll
a
watch
Ronald
that.
Reagan movie. I don't.
There's
I
going to be a
have no
Bruce
idea.
Springsteen movie coming out, Tom. And this
I did not
kid,
know that.
The kid from Bear is going to be playing Bruce, and it's going to be about the Nebraska album, Tom, the making
cool.
of the Nebraska album.
Very
Jeremy
cool.
Allen
Which
White,
was a
I believe
huge
is his
deal.
name. Look at me nailing that.
The acoustic, he got a lot of John Landau made that happen.
Yep.
That's all there is to it. Joining us right now, we figure, Boston College, huge upset of the
Back
weekend.
from
We have to get
Jackson
somebody
Hole.
in inform. Michael McKee joins us right now on this day where we go huge.
Did he stay late at
across
Jackson
New
Hole,
England.
like another week, maybe?
He does, I don't.
Okay, all
No,
right.
the animals want me to fly back right away. I have to be here Monday morning.
He's out
McKee's
there with the elk.
sliding in. Mike, I guess to frame out this new year, this September and into Q4, we had a 3% statistic revision for Q2. Why can't we repeat that this quarter? I mean, can we be wrong again, saying it's too slow an economy?
We can, and at the moment we are, at least according to the nowcasts. But we
right.
don't have that much data in yet for the third quarter, since we're still getting July data here at the end of August. But now we're looking forward to a fall where economists predict a slowdown, but they've been predicting it all year.
Right.
And Americans
Yeah.
keep surprising us by spending money.
Does the Fed do the same thing? I mean, they got 300 PhDs, whatever the number is. They're smarter than we are. But have they been equally wrong about a slow economy?
You obviously are not on X these days in terms of think the Fed is being smarter than we are. There's a lot of people who would dispute that. They have a huge statistical dragnet out there, and they're looking at a lot of things at all the reserve banks and at the board in many different ways, the economy, including a lot of private sector statistics. Plus, they're always talking to CEOs and people who are decision makers for the economy. And their view is that the economy is slow, but it is slowing down, but it is not falling off a cliff, and that there is still optimism among members of the public and the CEOs that things will turn out okay, maybe a little slower, but not bad. I think now what you're going to see is a certain amount of hesitation on people's parts until we get to November 5th. And that'll be somewhat of a turning point because depending on who wins, people will react one way or another, but they will have something to react to.
So we're going to get non-farm payrolls at the end of the week, Mike. I mean, 165,000, can you put that in context? Is that I mean, it's been crazy since the pandemic, jobs up, down, up, down. What's 165,000?
Well, we always need to create more jobs because the population is growing. And
Right, okay.
so the Fed thinks somewhere around 100,000 jobs a month need to be created. And if you slip below 100,000, it suggests that maybe things are getting really weak. And we got close with the 114,000 last month. But 165,000 would be considered a good result. For years after the great financial crisis, till we got to the pandemic, 165,000 was a good number. And now people are seeing it as a sign of slowdown because we averaged, 242,000 for a long time.
Somebody's asking here, Lisa from the Bahamas emails in. He says, how about that real wage? I haven't heard anybody talk about the inflation-adjusted wage growth. Is it still positive?
It's still positive. It actually gets more
everywhere
positive.
but the Mateo house.
It gets more positive because inflation goes down. So it adds to the level of real wage gains. It has slowed, but it is also running ahead of inflation at this point. So the Fed thinks that's all good as well.
Mike, if you're the Federal Reserve, 25 basis points in September, that's just fine, isn't it? They don't need to do anything more or anything less than that, do they?
That, in general, is their view.
Okay.
There are some who think they might need to do less, but I think they will have changed their minds by the time we get to September 18th. The feeling is the economy is performing okay, and inflation is continuing to go down. And so unless we get a real surprise on Friday that signals some kind of unexpected weakness in the economy, they're going to look to their normal pace of rate change.
So this is why I love having McKee in here. For some reason, I thought it was September 30th was the Fed meeting.
Oh, well, you go Fed go. That's all you need to do here.
I got FOMC go, and it's September 18th, which is close.
Yeah.
It's like soonish.
So we're going to put him on the Acela train.
Are they in the quiet period now?
No, there's no quiet
inflicted
period
by
for the
8
Fed.
speakers today?
Not yet. They've got another week to go.
Another week to tell us what?
But the same thing that they've been telling us, that the economy is doing okay and they're open to a rate move in September. Nobody wants to go on record as saying we're absolutely going to do it and it's going to be 25. The only thing we can tell you is that it will be at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, and Tom Keene will be presenting you the news.
The Fed decides.
That's the certainty that we have.
The certainty I have. The only reason we had you in here is not to talk about the economy. Just to see the Red Sox go into Citi Field is painful. I mean, I expected Lenny Dykstra to show up.
To go in and lose.
Do you think they could? They're distant in the wild card. They're just
they came out of the All-Star break looking like they were going to go, and they didn't.
They didn't.
But this was a year when Red Sox fans thought maybe they would get a little better, and they're building for the future with the rookies. And you've got Rafaela, and you've got Duran, and a lot of good, exciting young players, and then they build towards next year. So I hate to sound like a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, but wait till next year.
Exactly. And you got the Patriots coming up, so you're
and it's football season.
It's
yes,
football
as you
season.
say, a lot of college.
Boston College, big win.
Boston College, big win. Florida State is in trouble.
Yeah.
That's 2 they've
0 for
lost.
2. Yep.
And you go back to last season, they got destroyed by Georgia at the
I
end
watched
of the
some
season
Georgia
in a bowl
this
game.
weekend.
The
Georgia looks very good.
Yeah. Their defense is scary.
Yeah.
10 yards each side of the line of scrimmage. They're scary. They're like a pro team.
Yeah,
They look like an NFL
You're going to
team.
see a lot more of that now going forward because of the name, image, and likeness thing.
Now they're saying
did you see the really interesting thing in the New York Times this weekend about what these players get paid?
Yes.
What do they get paid?
A quarterback in the Southeastern Conference gets $1 million a year.
I mean,
Are you kidding me?
I saw Tom's jaw hit the floor.
The rosters on a team are $20 million. I mean, and that's just the floor. I mean, it's going to explode from here, I think.
Yeah, it's
so. I mean,
we don't have time for it now. We got to go. But Paul, we got to spend some time here. I watched read an ESPN future story. It's all hinged on gambling.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're going to be the gambling network.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
Mike McKee, thank you. Discussion on the Boston Red Sox and the American economy as well. Important week for McKee. Busy 10 days for Michael McKee. Coming up, head of all of our economic coverage. Futures, -30. The 10-year yield, 3.91%, 2-year, 3.93%. From New York City across the nation, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lise Mateo. Futures falling after August closed on a high note on Friday. Right now, NASDAQ futures up 0.6%. Dow futures, S&P futures down about 0.4%. Over to the two-year yield, 3.93%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.91%, and that's up 1 basis point. We have spot gold lower, $2,495 an ounce. Brent crude, $75 a barrel. WTI crude, $72 a barrel. Over to currencies, a dollar stronger, Japanese yen stronger. We have euro, British pound weaker, Bitcoin, little change at 59,000. Few companies making news. We'll start with Cathay Pacific. It canceled almost all of its scheduled flights from Hong Kong to Singapore, and that's because it had to inspect the engines of its Airbus A350 planes. Now, that news has Airbus shares. Their ADRs down about 1%. Boeing also feeling a little bit of that pressure. Their shares down about 3%. But the reason why, Wells Fargo gave the company a rare negative analyst rating, moving to underweight from equal weight. And finally, Reuters reporting Elliott. It's boosted its stake in Southwest Airlines to 10%. Southwest shares up about 2%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. It's the beginning of the year. I mean, it's all there is to it. It is a summer thing and you're back. And I know that back used to be today and tomorrow. Afterthought is orientation today.
Oh,
so
that's big.
They think they decide, should they go get Boba Mosa tea here, or should they go to this pizza parlor or that one? That's how you orient. So anyways, I thought in the equity markets, we would start strong with orientation with Linda Dissel. She's with Fed Hermes, and she's perfect to talk to if you are not participating in this market. Linda, you got to be in the market. How do you be in the market now?
Well, good morning, Tom and Paul. Thank you very much for having me today. Yes, you have to be in the market. Really, 70% of the time, the economy's in growth mode, so you probably just want to always be in the market. Try not to time it. Right now, we're in the fall, just before an election. September, the worst month. Everybody kind of knows it. Volatility maybe goes up, and you have to expect that could steal some of us. However, you've got values out there. You've got things on sale out there. And if you just go out and look for what is inexpensive but has good fundamentals, then it doesn't really matter about the day-to-day or month-to-month.
So, Linda, I mean, a lot of folks out there have been, primed to the Magnificent Seven and the performance we've seen there. Where do you see opportunities here in the market? We just came through an earnings cycle, which was pretty solid. We've got a Fed that's looking to cut rates. Where should we be looking these days?
The Mag 7 is where all the money has been, and actually large cap growth is where we have our only underweight at Federated Hermes, because it has been somewhat overdone, especially for these biggest names. But all year long, and we've been saying this all year long, it's been the case that both small cap stocks and high quality defensive cyclicals, also cyclicals in general, if you thought we were going to get another breath of growth, are inexpensive, but particularly small caps and defensive dividend pairs are historically inexpensive. And whenever we had the volatility at the beginning of August, you saw the pretty good pullback there. What you saw were some of the defensive names really starting to power through. So healthcare is one of the sectors that is an overweight for us. And on an equal weighted basis, it has recently broken through to its all-time high. So that's looking pretty good as we go into the fall here.
So, Linda, what did you take away from this earnings cycle that we just concluded here? It seems like the top line and bottom line numbers were pretty solid.
They were solid. It just kind of reminds us that it's dangerous to call for a recession too prematurely. And that's what's been going on now for almost 2 years. What we have said is that we'll be watching closely the profit margins of corporate America as they tell us how they did, because profit margins have been at all-time highs for the last several years. With inflation and the ability to push through those higher costs to a consumer that had lots of cash in their pockets. What surprised a lot of people was that in this last earnings quarter, 2/3 of the companies reported higher profit margins. And that is really, that's really good news. That is a broadening out of the strength of our economy. So if we see the stock market pull back, we need to remember those Mag 7s are heavyweights in the stock market.
Well, the heavyweight,
and the equal weight, it could be good.
Let's talk about diversification right now as a tendency. Everybody, particularly in the the large cap space, has become less diversified with the success of a selective few stocks. Do we just need to get used to this, where the top 10 stocks are 30 or dare I say 50% of our portfolio?
I don't think we need to get used to this. And this is also something we've seen in the past. Whenever there are big technology waves, it's very exciting, and leaders come out and strong. And then, of course, in the case of AI, the infrastructure build, and there are your semiconductor companies, and NVIDIA is the poster child. This has been played before, but in this case, these biggest names are extremely strong. They're very profitable names. So it's been kind of safe, really, to put your money into them. Their earnings have been so strong. So even if the price you're paying for those earnings is high, it's not ridiculously high. But you can tend to not look elsewhere. And anybody that puts 50% or 30% or whatever of one area in their portfolio is taking on a big risk. And that's why it's good when we have broadening out.
All right, Linda, so talk to us about valuation here. You talked about broadening out of the market here. How do I think about valuation in this market? Is it expensive? I mean, if I just look at the S&P 500, it feels expensive, but maybe if I pull out some Mag 7 stocks, it's less so. How do you think about it?
Yeah, that's the problem with the valuation in the market, and that's why it's really good to look at the breakdown within equal weighted and the like. The small caps, which I've already referenced, are historically inexpensive versus the S&P 500 and the large caps. Mm-hmm. The last time they were this inexpensive was when you had the tech bubble ready to burst back in 2000. Right. And inflation is coming down, so you can pay up a bit more for that. Much more cash on corporate balance sheets, much less asset heavy. It's tough to compare versus history, but the cheapest sector of all is energy on a PE
That's right.
basis.
Yeah, it's right where I wanted to go, Linda. Literally, I was bringing up CVX. As you were mentioning it, folks, Chevron, the forward multiple is under 13. Wow. That's like U.S. Steel 20 years ago. Is that like a value trap, or is there an ability in energy to find a superior return out 3 years?
Well, it's only a value trap if you think everybody's going to be using EVs, in the next number of years, or if you think there's going to be a big global recession, because around the globe, and truly a lot of the large developed countries around the world are weakening right now. Everybody's eyes are on China. That's the second largest economy in the world. That's one reason why energy is coming down. Also, if the value of the U.S. dollar is weakening, and at least historically, energy was priced in U.S. dollars, these things could be bringing energy down. But fundamentally, there's really nothing particularly wrong with these companies, unless you worry about CapEx. And then in that case, you need to worry about name by name basis. But names like Chevron, which you brought up, they give you a really nice dividend while you wait. And if you don't see a global recession, which we don't see, at least not a U.S. recession or anything deep anytime soon, then you have a true value. It's the cheapest sector versus its 30-year price to earnings ratio to the market than any of the sectors in the S&P.
Linda, thank you. Linda Dissel getting us started here with Federated Hermes out of Pittsburgh. Just thrilled to have her on. We've got lots more good equity voices coming up. Matt Hornbach from Morgan Stanley in a bit. Dean Kernett in the 9 o'clock hour, really informed discussion on the lack of volume in August, and maybe we see volume in September. Right now, futures negative 26, VIX 16.46. There's not a panic to it. It's just a shift. BitDog 59,000. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. After 6 Israeli hostages were found shot dead in the Gaza tunnel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did something he had not done in 11 months of war. He apologized to the bereaved families. Still, in a defiant press conference, Netanyahu said Israel will not give up control of the border area between Gaza and Egypt as Hamas has demanded. This as pressure to come to a ceasefire deal with Hamas grows. We get more with Bloomberg's news director for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, Rosalind Matheson.
Well, the pressure has been quite intense from the US and elsewhere, and we've seen quite sizable protests in recent days, although the protests today look like they have tapered a bit. They are smaller in size, so maybe some of that initial pressure is fading, but certainly you're seeing a high level of frustration both within Israel itself, but also our allies, including the US, about how after months and months of conversation, we're still not really much closer to an agreement for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson. Vice President Kamala Harris has used the joint campaign appearance with President Joe Biden in the swing state of Pennsylvania to say that U.S. steel should remain domestically owned. Her remarks concur with the White House's months-long opposition to the company's planned sale to Nippon Steel of Japan. Congolese authorities say that an attempted jailbreak in the country's main prison left 129 people dead, including some who were shot, and others who died in a stampede at the overcrowded facility. It's not known if those killed were all inmates. Finally, 60s teen idol James Darren has died in Los Angeles.
There's no such thing as the next best thing to love.
Darren helped ignite the beach party film genre by starring and singing in the 1959 film Gidget. James Darren was 88. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Michael, we have a special guest coming in, so could you get out of the chair and come back after the Detroit Lions' first win?
Well, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that. So here I go.
NFL this weekend. Michael Barr, thank you so much. Joining us now, I looked at a rain-swept gray Paris today out on Twitter, and after the Olympics, it's like in the fall. You've traveled to Kathmandu. Where do you go next? Joining us now, Europe on $5 a day correspondent Charles Pellet. Where do you go next?
Well, I tell you, I'm booking my next cruise. I don't know where yet. I just got off the most amazing cruise, went all the way up to Scotland, over to Iceland. I saw lava on the bus ride to the airport over the weekend in Reykjavik. I had dinner with a famous economist on board a ship. Now, I don't know if I should name names yet, but this guy's pretty famous. He had to get back to New York to do a TV interview on a competing network, but dinner with an economist.
What's that about?
It was unbelievable.
Can you name who the economist was, or is it like too private? Okay, we won't go there.
No, Tom, I'm like, if I had dinner with you on a ship, would you want me to name you on the radio? All right.
I've never been on a ship, but that's a deal.
But this was, I saw puffins in Iceland.
Puffins.
I went to, it was in Scotland. I searched for the Loch Ness Monster. I didn't find Nessie.
Did you go to the lake
I went to
monster is?
It's a loch, and I got kind of a picture in a way that I put up on Instagram.
Oh, please, that's going to work on
social media. Look at Trump on his social.
No, but I didn't think that we were going to find the Loch Ness Monster. However, the guy that was running the tour, he brings along like a little fake dinosaur that you can put at the front of the ship, so it looks like you've got a real Loch Ness Monster.
Can you do cruise ships with frequent flyer miles?
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. I've never thought about that. The way that I would do it is I would look at your total cost of getting on board the ship, your total cost of getting there. So I used Delta miles to get over to London, then Delta to get back from Reykjavik. So that took, roughly $1,000 out of the whole cost of the adventure.
Okay.
So that's one way to do it.
Okay.
You know what I'm thinking? Me, you, Lisa, Paul Sweeney, inside cabin, 4 of us on board a Carnival cruise ship. Let's go, baby.
We've talked about surveillance.
Hey, Michael Barr. There we go.
Michael Barr.
Michael Barr can be with us.
Behind the
pole.
pole.
Guys.
So I got 10 seconds. Where are you going next?
I haven't. All I can tell you is this cruise line spoiled me. It was a high-end cruise line. Typically, I'm used to going on the lower-end cruise lines.
We know that.
I have a lot of fun on those. But I finished number 2 in the putting contest, and I finished number 1 in the music trivia contest. So that was kind of cool.
That sounds like a phenomenal
Charles
time.
Pellet, Surveillance Europe on $5 a day correspondent. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures lower as traders get ready for what's typically considered the most challenging month for stocks. Right now, NASDAQ futures down about 0.6%. Dow futures, S&P futures down about 0.5%. We have the 2-year yield at 3.93%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.92%, and that's up 1 basis point. Shares of Intel lower, down nearly 1%. This is after a report from Reuters that CEO Pat Gelsinger and key executives would be meeting with the chipmakers board later this month to present a plan to cut costs. And then you have shares of Tesla up nearly 1%. Data from the China Passenger Car Association, it showed it sold 3% more China-made cars in August from a year earlier, 17% more than the previous month. And on top of that, Reuters reporting Tesla planning to introduce a 6-seat version of its Model Y car in China from late 2025. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Quietly, over the last 2-3 months, Disney has faded. Paul, 10-year track record, a return of 1.07% per year.
Yep.
The boom up to 21. Do you blame Mr. Iger for the collapse of an industry? I don't think you can.
Well, I don't blame Iger for the collapse of the industry. I just, the fact is technology has come in and disrupted the entertainment business like it has many other businesses. And we're probably just right smack in the middle of a multi-year situation where the industry is trying to figure out how do they generate a return on all their investments. And they don't know right now. The streaming situation is not there from a profitability perspective, so the profits from streaming aren't nearly as big as the profits from just being on a cable TV system back in the day.
Someone you and I adore, Laura Martin's been doing this for years at Needham.
Yep.
She's up $20, 90 up to a 110 target. How?
I think she's largely saying, they've got just phenomenal content, all the content that Disney has, and at some point they're going to figure out a way to make money off that. Content is king. Sumner Redstone said way back in the day, and Disney has some of the best content.
Robert Fishman, Moffett-Nathanson, worst
Solid.
job on Wall Street. He has to work with Michael Nathanson, telling him what to do.
Exactly.
He's even more bullish at 120.
Yep.
Up
Good for them.
$30.
Yep.
I don't get the how forward.
No, I don't know, and most investors don't either.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. Disney, we'll be watching that into Q4 as well.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look, well, it's the Lisa Mateo Hour. It's brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their bond marketplace. Access Interactive Brokers' vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities, no markups, no built-in spreads, low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. Paul and I think IBKR for foundational support. Where in God's name have you been, Tucker, a shadow of Lisa Mateo, and doing the newspapers? Go.
Oh, all right. The workforce is changing this year, okay? How? Gen Z workers expected to outnumber baby boomers in the U.S. workforce. Why is that an issue? Because the bosses don't know how to work with them. So Gen Z, born between 1997, 2012, just to give you that idea for those out there.
Okay.
So a lot of them entered the workforce remotely. So they didn't learn those workplace norms, all those communication skills. So now the Wall Street Journal is saying that companies are doing things like mentorships, trying to help them. They're giving them guidance how to communicate. They're even offering on-site therapists to talk with them and help them through this time as they start to go back to the work. On-site therapists.
For who?
For these Gen Z workers who are now going to be more outnumber the baby boomers in the workforce.
How old is Gen Z roughly? I can't keep them straight. There's
So
millennial.
they're born between 1997 and 2012. So
so it's like a Brad Summer. It's a Brad
younger
crew.
than the millennials. Yeah.
See, my first boss on the Payne Weber trading desk in 1986 just smacked me on the head every morning at 9:29 and said, "Don't lose money today."
That was
it.
That's what you got.
And I did not.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't have a therapist, but okay.
Am I deficient in that I have zero sympathy? Like zero?
You're not alone. I'll just put it that way.
But we have to adapt. I would say, as managers, you need to adapt. Right?
If they're going to outnumber the baby boomers, this is going to be
the Wall Street Journal says.
So that's what they're saying. You have to adapt because they want more meaning, more mentorship. They want a sense of purpose in their workday.
Okay. My sense of purpose was, I had a P&L. I had a P&L on my computer screen in my trading desk, and if I was positive, that was a good day. It was negative, it was a bad day. Johnny Coggins would come over.
Can you see Mateo in the kitchen?
No.
When one of the Gen Zers started, and she's throwing a pan.
That's it.
She's taking the Revere skillet. Shut up. Next.
All right, we go from Gen Z to Gen Alpha. They're even younger, so that's 14 and under.
You're killing me.
Okay, so the Gen Alpha, they are into decluttering. They care more about the environment, but they also like to spend. So this is from Business Insider. Yes. So they're more selective, though, about their spending. So what they spend on, for example, I notice it, the Sephora spending.
Oh, I noticed that.
Yes.
During the
The
pandemic.
younger generation is spending a lot more on that. So, well, their parents might.
Right.
They're also, here's something interesting, they're heading to the mall more often. So they like in-store purchasing rather than the online. So back in the day when I used to head to the mall, that was a thing.
Yep.
We kind of lost that, but now they're saying with Gen Alpha, it's starting to come back again.
Alpha.
Gen Alpha,
It's the first time I've heard that. All I know is during the pandemic, Tom, when the whole world was shut down, the Sephora store across the street on Lexington Avenue, packed.
Yes.
But I would suggest we need a seamless-free, DoorDash-free September.
Yes.
Can we institute that?
I have. I've removed the DoorDash app from my daughter's phone.
I'm sitting at home with a beverage in my hand, screaming, "Mr. Sweeney cut off his children.
Yep.
You will be too." That's what we're heading for September.
Set the example. This next story is from Bloomberg Screen Time. Really good because he's talking about media giants struggling with how to make money from the streaming live sports. ESPN held this meeting. They brought reporters in, so they started talking about what they're doing. They're focusing on streaming, fantasy sports, and gambling. So they talked about a couple of things. They have this thing called Flagship. They kind of nicknamed it this. It's this new service. It's going to integrate ESPN fantasy betting platforms on schedule to launch around this time next year. No word on how much it's going to charge. And then Disney, you know about the whole thing with Venue, the $43 a month thing. That's kind of still, going through legal issues.
I think that's DOA.
Yeah.
The courts kind of shut it down, and it's a real.
And now's the time. This weekend, NFL.
Yeah, exactly.
Next.
Yep, so that's what it is. They're saying on the sports betting. And finally, this was in the Telegraph, the Titanic deteriorating 112 years after it sank. You had these underwater robots. They took images of the wreck. The railing of the bow of the Titanic, popular in the movie, right? That's where Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet had their first kiss. It's now at the bottom of the sea. So it's starting to break apart.
It fell off of the boat?
It fell off of the boat. It's at the bottom. That's a huge part of it. And so they're starting to see the metal structure is starting to be eaten away. So, after 112 years, it's starting to show its age, I guess.
Wow. It's been, 1912.
Yes.
April 15th, 1912. Is when the Titanic went down. Wow.
There is a small, lovely little park up Broadway, almost up to Columbia. Just a little tiny, beautifully, for the city of New York, landscape park. And it's in honor of, I believe it was the couple in the movie, the Astors or whatever, the older couple. Mm-hmm. And it's just very serene. And you can see the whole city was shaken by it.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
You think about
back then.
Exactly.
The movie, 1997, can you believe that?
Yeah, no.
Where are we talking? Yeah. We're talking like 35, whatever years, 25 years. There it is. And of course, it's Celine. Celine killed it. Highlight of the summer, Celine Dion at the Paris Olympics.
Yeah,
she nailed it.
She nailed it.
Bringing it.
She did. There was all that controversy and all that, and Celine was rock solid. Well, that's good. I'm glad you're back, Lisa. John Tucker doing the newspapers?
No.
It was like Titanic going down every day. Oh, no. John was like, John, do it like Lisa.
Tucker.
Do it like Lisa. No, I can't. Whatever. We'll stay in a Titanic theme here. Celine. For Jack. Jack.
Once more.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo from New York City. Welcome all of you across the nation. 4 hours away from a launch. Joe Matthew launching in Boston, 92.9 FM at Boston. We do that at 12 noon today, and we will be there tomorrow on a ginormous signal.
92.9.
92.9 FM.
Big stick, as they say.
Today, but we'll be there tomorrow, like 7 a.m. tomorrow. Millinocket, good morning, Millinocket, Maine. They'll be hearing us. And
where's that?
Got a photo from the National Hotel on Block Island.
Yeah.
You know, they'll be listening.
Okay.
There's a ginormous signal up in New England. Good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. I'll just not mince words. Record August, thank you. We're thrilled with the growth that we see there on Android Auto, Apple CarPlay as well. The future's negative 30, but Paul, it's sort of like we're back to school orientation. It's not like a panic negative 30.
No, everybody's just kind of back to school, taking a look at everything. You know, everybody's off the beach and looking at things here. So we got a little bit of a sell-off here, just about a half of 1%. Nothing to write home about.
You know, we got a guy out on YouTube. Thank you, teacher, so much for this. Lisa, you're going to love this. Saw Titanic last year for the first time. Great special effects. Awful movie. Worst song. I guess
But Kate
that's
Winslet
un-American.
was stunning.
It was a great movie.
Great movie.
I thought it was great.
Phenomenal.
Still works.
Yeah.
Honored to speak to James Cameron one evening at the Piano Bar in Davos about it.
Of course he did. Who doesn't?
He was holding court with Emily. He and Emily were holding court at the Piano
Very
Bar.
good. That's how you do it.
The Interactive Broker Studios, that's what we believe in. The Interactive Broker Studios and the Bloomberg Business Flash is Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We've got red on the screen on this holiday shortened trading week. Right now we have the NASDAQ futures down about 0.6%, Dow futures and S&P futures down about 0.5%. We have the 2-year yield 3.93%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.91%, and that is little change. To currencies, the dollar extended modest gains. We have the Japanese yen. It rallied after the Bank of Japan governor said the central bank will continue to raise interest rates if the economy and prices perform as expected. Right now, Japanese yen up about 0.5% at 146.15 against the dollar. Euro, British pound weaker. Bitcoin up about 0.1% at 59,000. We have shares of U.S. Steel down more than 4%. Vice President Kamala Harris joined President Biden saying that the company should remain domestically owned and operated. And then other companies making news, well, it's DirecTV. They failed to reach a new distribution deal with Disney. Because of that, well, more than 11 million subscribers lost access to channels including ESPN and ABC over the weekend. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Scott Clemens now with Brown Brothers Harriman. Sell in May and go away. That didn't work out.
No, you know, I've got kids still in school and a wife who's a teacher, so the day after Labor Day always feels like a new beginning.
It's a new year.
It's a new year, and we're coming back to school, if you will, to something that looks very much like I hesitate to jinx it, but a Goldilocks type scenario. Inflation now has a 2 handle. We're in September, which, check my math on this, is the 3rd month of the 3rd quarter, and it looks like the 3rd quarter GDP will also have a 2 handle on it. So in some ways, kind of the best of all possible worlds. Obviously, the thing we're watching very closely over the balance of this year is both the timing and the tempo of how the Fed responds to this shifting interplay between inflation and the economy.
But to go back to Brown Brothers Harriman, which was there right after Caesar was killed, the answer is, you've seen all this before. Business, investors, corporations adapt. That's my core theme.
Of course they do. There's a lot of resilience to it. And yes, the firm was founded in 1818, so we've been around for 35 presidential terms, 45 recessions, even 3 pandemics if you're counting. So what we learn again and again and again is that companies that have a greater than average degree of control over their own destiny are durable and they're resilient. And it really comes down to free cash flow. It's not rocket science.
And for those of you out there in the listening verse and the viewer verse, Brown Brothers Harriman, go Google them. I mean, that is a name that goes way, way back, as Scott just mentioned, 1818. Not the biggest name on Wall Street, but one of the more esteemed names on Wall Street. Scott, We just came through an earnings cycle that seems pretty good to me. I've got a Federal Reserve that we think is going to be easing rates. That seems like pretty positive for stocks. I think even I can make money in the stock market.
I think you can too. Here's the thing, though, to pay attention to. When we talk about the market, it's hard to use that monolithically because with the quote market up 18% S&P year to date, of course that's been pretty narrowly led by the usual suspects. What's remarkable to me, and even encouraging to me as an active investor, is that if you look within the market, a full quarter of the names in the S&P 500, not by weight, just by name, 125 names in the S&P 500 have negative signs in front of their year-to-date return. So we're all aware that there's been a very narrowly led, tech-led rally for the duration of this year. A lot's been left behind, and there's a lot of quality in that that's not trading in elevated multiples.
So where do we go here? I mean, do I think about market cap, small and mid? Do I think about sectors that have just underperformed? How do you guys think about having a conversation with your clients that's not Apple, Amazon, blah, blah, blah?
We've been very encouraged since really the beginning of June, I guess, to see the market broaden out a little bit. So small caps have outperformed over the past two months, 3 months now. NASDAQ hasn't necessarily led the way. That's encouraging to me. I get worried when the market is so top-heavy. Top-heavy, narrowly led markets tend to be volatile. I think we saw that a little bit in early August. We had a couple of days worth of reminder of that. I don't think that's gone away. Volatility tends to accompany turning points in economic activity, turning points in monetary policy. We may be on the verge of that. So buckle up, but pay attention to the long term and to fundamentals.
Are you diversified now? Are you focused in sector and also individual holdings?
So, Tom, the answer is yes, we're diversified, even outside the United States and outside the dollar. The dollar and the U.S. have led the way for, a decade now. There are opportunities outside the states. If there is a concentration within the portfolio, it's a heightened focus on quality, and quality is defined by balance sheet strength and the creation of free cash flow.
Yeah, to me that's the key.
I know.
I mean, that's not where everyone is, but it seems to be
easy to say, a little harder to implement.
Yeah.
All right, so he's in the Mag 7. He's fine. He's planning his trip to Rome. How about for the rest of us? I mean, if I sit there in a 2-year Treasury, I can get close to 4%. Is that enough, or my fixed income portfolio, do I need to maybe take some more risk here?
You don't need to take a lot of risk in fixed income at present. Credit risk or duration risk, maturity risk, for that matter, because you're able to earn those kind of returns. But I've encouraged people, we've encouraged our clients at Brown Brothers not to become complacent with the idea that you can earn a mid-single-digit return in a money market or in a short-term Treasury. Again, if the Fed is on the verge of beginning to cut interest rates and you fall asleep at the switch, that may not be the case 6 months from now.
One of the great things about surveillance, folks, is Surveillance Audible. We're going to do it right now. David Gura joining us in the 9 o'clock hour on the presidential debate, September 10, Bloomberg's coverage of that ABC debate. With Scott Clemens, like with Bob Michael and others, we can talk about the past with his work on Greece and his work on Rome. What's the parallel you see? And I don't mean the theater of Julius Caesar, but just the sequence of emperors with our debate right now on democracy and autocracy in America.
I think the parallels to the ancient world are to be careful of gradual losses of liberty. There wasn't really something that happened overnight in Rome that turned it from a republic into an empire. Of course, it happened all of a sudden when it got to that point, but it was very gradual up until then. And there were people like Cicero warning against that. And Cicero paid the ultimate price for that in 43. So there are lessons to be learned from the ancient world, because although so much has changed, the one thing that is immutable over the eons is human nature.
Does our technology, I guess we have a Cicero out there, I'll let you describe who he is, but someone trying to be thoughtful, philosophic, and balanced, can they do that? Are they enhanced with technology, or are we hindered by... Paul's on social media right now. So, no.
Of course, the answer is yes and no. Yes, because one individual voice can be amplified through social media, but because everyone's voice can be amplified through social media, it's very noisy, very noisy.
Scott Clemens, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Just want to really, for the Brown Brothers Harriman there, we love
Princeton, Tom, you majored in Classics?
I'm jealous. I wish
he goes to
I
Hoagie Haven.
majored-
I mean, he goes to Hoagie Haven and he gets, who knows what he's getting there.
I majored in ice hockey, so
Yeah,
you know, it's just sort of the same, actually. Scott Clemens, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. You're going to have to ease out. I want to get
Yeah, we're
Michael
gonna put
Barr in
Michael
the
Barr in
chair here because we got important things to talk about in NFL and Detroit Lions. Futures negative 28. The 2-year yield, 3.93%. 10-year yield, 3.91. Really flat curve, 2-10 spread.
Yeah, how about that, Tom?
Negative 2 beeps. And I don't think enough's been made about that for August. You
No.
know, it's been there.
I mean, that was 100 basis points, obviously a year and a half ago or so.
Yeah, Brent crude, with all going on in the Middle East, we'll address that with David Gura here in the 9. But after a very difficult weekend in the Levant, Brent crude 76.09, down $1. I'm going to call that quiescent, is the way I'd put it. Gold flat, 25.25. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Thousands of Israeli protesters have called on their government to reach a hostage and ceasefire deal with Hamas after the Israeli military recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who'd been held by the militant group. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insists Israeli troops will remain in Gaza.
We're out to destroy the military capabilities of Hamas and the governing capabilities of Hamas, and we're well on our way to achieving both. That is total victory.
Hamas says it wants a complete Israeli withdrawal as per the ceasefire framework that had been outlined by President Biden. The president, along with Vice President Kamala Harris, met with negotiators at the White House yesterday. The presidential election is getting into full swing after the Labor Day holiday. Vice President Kamala Harris told the United Steelworkers Union in Pittsburgh that she would oppose the sale of U.S. Steel to Japan's Nippon Steel.
U.S. Steel is an historic American company, and it is vital for our nation to maintain strong American steel companies, and I couldn't agree more with President Biden. U.S. Steel should remain American-owned and American-operated.
The statement is Kamala Harris's first on the proposed deal and aligns with President Biden, who has also pledged to keep U.S. Steel domestically owned. Republican nominee Donald Trump has also called the transaction should be blocked. The former president did not have any campaign events scheduled over the holiday weekend, but he and Harris will be returning to Pennsylvania next week when they face off for the first time in the ABC-hosted presidential debate on September 10th in Philadelphia. Finally, Cathay Pacific Airways has canceled multiple flights to inspect Airbus A350 fuel lines. Inspection of its fleet is focused on deformed or degraded fuel lines in the engines of the wide-body aircraft. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. I'm not as sophisticated on this at all. Full disclosure, I've never spent a penny betting on sports. I really don't know why I say that, but it's true. And the answer is I'm now seeing banners on TV, I think, framing out the betting and odds.
It's everywhere, Tom, everywhere.
I mean, there's no turning back.
No.
Paul, do you assume that gambling will be dominant within a matter of time?
Absolutely. And you've seen it no more than the Walt Disney Company, Mickey Mouse. They didn't want to be anywhere near gambling. Neither did the NFL. Now you've got both of the NFL and ESPN and all in on gaming.
In the couch at the bar house, are you putting in bets for the 49ers and the Lions at the same time?
Yeah, well, yeah. And bet with your head, folks. That's all I can say.
Do you hedge the marriage? I mean,
Yeah.
We'll have to see. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures falling as investors await a key jobs report on Friday could set the market tone for the rest of the year. Now, the government will also issue figures on July job vacancies this week. Today, though, economic data kicks off with a read on U.S. manufacturing. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, Dow futures, S&P futures down about 0.4%. We have the 2-year yield 3.93%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.91%. And that is little changed. We have spot gold, that's lower at $2,496 an ounce. We have Brent crude $76 a barrel, WTI crude $72 a barrel. Few companies making news. Volkswagen, the company considering closing factories in Germany for the first time in its 87-year history. The reason? Well, to cut costs. And sources say Goldman Sachs plans to dismiss a few hundred employees in the coming weeks. And here's a new trend. More restaurants catering to a growing number of solo diners. In the U.S., Party for One reservations risen 29% over the last 2 years. That's according to OpenTable. So restaurants redoing their seating and changing their menus because of it. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Really? Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. We'll talk about that. You sit at the bar.
I sit at the bar. I'm totally up with that.
That's all there is to it. We are thrilled that Joe Matthew will begin our coverage on 92.9 FM Boston at 12 noon today. He deserves to do that more than anybody in our fold. Joe's legendary across the Boston landscape. He brings a sense of politics, which only can come from the fractious battle known as Boston politics. Joe Matthew, Balance of Power. Look for that 12 noon today, 92.9 FM. With that, we're also going to touch upon all the heritage of Boston in economics, finance, investment into Q4, into 2025. We start incredibly strong with Ben Heineke of Morgan Stanley. And Ben, for me, it's as simple as my family heritage of 1 million years ago, a young Dan Fuss over at Loomis Sales, or, Eaton was there, Eaton and Howard, and then they were taken out by Vance Sanders, and then there was
you're going
Vance,
way back, Tom.
Way back. I don't go back that far, and Ben Heineke does. But let's just begin with the why. Why did Morgan Stanley buy into traditional Boston wealth management with Eaton Vance?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me this morning. Look, from an acquisition perspective, Eaton Vance was an extremely attractive target for us, just in terms of the capabilities that they had and what they brought to the MSIM family. It was very a complementary acquisition. Eaton Vance has obviously a long history. They were founded in 1924, so they're a little over 100 years in Boston. Instrumental in actually founding the initial mutual fund, so a proud part of the asset management history. But look, we were excited about the culture that they have. Obviously, Boston has such a rich history in asset management, and Eaton Vance was a really big.
How will active management compete in a Vanguard? There's a small firm, Ben, up on Devonshire. I think it's called Fidelity. That's what it's called. How do you compete with index funds at Morgan Stanley if you're trying to create alpha with active management?
Look, I think there are areas where active management outperforms. There are areas where it has struggled, especially recently, some of the Mag 7 developments. I think we believe in a portfolio, there's room for both active and passive. There are places where you want to lower your overall fee level and use passive. There are places where active can really outperform and add value to your portfolio. So it's not, to me, ever been an either or situation. These are both tools that can be used to build a responsible portfolio, and you don't have to pick one or the other. And we think for the future, there's going to be a role for both.
Hey, Ben, as a former sell-side analyst, I spent a lot of time up in Boston, and companies come to Boston every day to meet all the fund managers up in Boston. What types of companies are you looking forward to seeing these days coming through your offices?
Look, I think I was an investment banker in my first job out of college, so I spent a lot of time on road shows dragging slide decks through Boston traffic and trying to find all those different offices. But look, I think we're excited about healthcare. We're excited about some of the exciting things that are happening from an investment perspective in Boston around the university complex there. Some really exciting new companies coming on the forefront in Boston, starting to really actually compete with Silicon Valley and some of the other areas of tech innovation.
I went to a meeting, Ben. I'm going to show my age by saying it was probably a soiree at Lockover's, where this strange company from Chicago with a guy named John Rogers said we can be socially acceptable. This is like foundational 30, 35 years ago. Calvert to Eaton Vance, Calvert to Morgan Stanley. How do you fold social investing into what you're doing at Morgan Stanley, given the challenges of ESG at this moment?
Well, look, Tom Faust and his team, I thought, were very forward-thinking in acquiring Calvert. And as we assessed Eaton Vance as an acquisition target, Calvert was certainly a big contributing factor to one of the assets and capabilities that Eaton Vance had, which would be very complementary to Morgan Stanley. MSIM is a very global business, far more global than Eaton Vance was prior to the acquisition. Obviously, ESG dialogue, there are varying levels of intensity. Certainly in Europe, in certain parts of Asia, it really become almost a requirement in your ability to deliver ESG investing. And so we thought the marriage of the investment engine that we have across all these different asset classes, plus all of the research and all of the capabilities that Calvert bring, we can really put together customized solutions for clients to build ESG solutions in a way that many firms can't.
Is Mag 7 an ESG company?
I don't know about that. I see it's pretty energy intensive, some of those businesses. So we'll have to see.
So, Ben, right now we just came through a pretty solid earnings season. We've got a Fed that seems poised to be cutting interest rates. How are you positioning your portfolios for that type of environment?
Look, so our Global Investment Committee and the research team here at Morgan Stanley believe that we're still headed for a soft landing and that the Fed will start to cut this fall, and that they believe that we can get through this without a recession. But I think there is fat tail risks on each side. So our Global Investment Committee, who really dictates asset allocation for our retail channel, is keeping us fairly conservatively positioned as we get through this tricky time. And obviously we have the election coming as well. So, we're still optimistic for a soft landing, but there are some fat tail risks on either side that we want to keep our eyes on.
Ben, thank you so much. Ben Heineke with Morgan Stanley and Eaton Vance as we celebrate a new launch at Boston. You're going to hear a lot of Boston stuff here the next number of months and weeks here as we celebrate 92.9 FM in Boston this morning, 12 noon. Joe Matthew leading us off, and completely appropriate that he will do that with his good political coverage. There is a primary in Massachusetts today.
Is there?
There is.
All right,
it's not really contested. I believe that Senator Warren possibly is not threatened.
Okay, good for her.
But anyways, there's a primary there. That'll be perfect for Joe Matthew. And of course, really looking forward to all that we're doing, really from Washington 99.1 up to Bloomberg 11.30 in Boston on traditional radio 92.9 FM. Boston, look for that at 12 noon today and there forward. Out on YouTube, Bloomberg Podcasts. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, building each and every week. Thank you so much for that. And of course, we must say on Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, they're launching new software. Maybe it has to do, we haven't even mentioned September 9. How many iPhones is a Sweeney family acquiring this month?
I'm going big. I'm going to be on the Fifth Avenue store. I'm going to be one of those people
You're
that's
going to go
to
to the store?
Yes, I think so.
I think I'm forced to go to the telephone company.
Maybe I'll go there. I'm not
they
sure.
Got to. I mean, I'm being to please.
I don't think anybody's going to cut me a deal, though.
Well,
I don't think they're dealing right
now.
now.
Gene Munster says yes, they will. Dan Ives says yes, they will. They're keeping it. It's quiet.
I mean, mine thing is just literally failing as we speak, but it's been a good, I don't know how many years I've had it with this.
They do that. The battery starts to not
serve me well. I'm ready to step up here.
Communist plot or something.
Exactly.
Out on YouTube, thank you so much for the running commentary today. We went down in flames with Titanic.
Yeah.
I mean, they were cruel and unusual. Lisa demanded that we play Celine, so we had to
always solid.
Do it as well. Economic data critical this week. Jobs Day on Friday.
Yeah.
Flat out. That's
I'll be
the
here.
data of the week. You'll be here.
I'll be here.
Oh my word. That's a surveillance break exclusive. Is everyone in control room going to be here? I can't stand it. Summer's over. Sweeney, here, Friday. Stay with us worldwide, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures in the red. NASDAQ futures down 0.6%. Dow futures, S&P futures down about 0.5%. And this is after August closed on a high note on Friday. Right now, we have the 2-year yield at 3.93%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.91%. And that is little change. We have spot gold lower, $2,493 an ounce. Brent crude, $76 a barrel. WTI crude, $72 a barrel. Over to currencies, the dollar stronger. Japanese yen up about 0.5% at 146.18 against the dollar. Euro, British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin up about 0.3% at 59,000. Companies making news. Cathay Pacific, it's canceled almost all of its scheduled flights from Hong Kong to Singapore, and that's because it has to inspect the engines of its Airbus A350 planes. Airbus shares in Paris, they're down about 1%. That news also putting pressure on Boeing. Their shares down 3%, but a big part of that, though, is because because Wells Fargo gave the company a rare negative analyst rating, downgrading the stock to underweight. And finally, Reuters reporting Elliott boosted its stake in Southwest Airlines to 10%. Southwest shares up about 2%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thank you so much. There are two, it's just great to talk to Morgan Stanley, Eaton Vance about investment. And I learned this, I sort of stumbled into this. It wasn't a received wisdom when I was 28 or whatever. There are exactly two people on the strategy side. Fancy academic people that have never enjoyed the bid walking away from them. Mm-hmm. And then there's people that migrate from a trading desk, a rates desk, over to strategy and portfolio management.
Who does that?
They're different.
Yep.
They're hardwired. You learn this at Villanova. And the Kristina, it's just the real deal because she's enjoyed having the bid walk away from her.
Bid walk away. Kristina Campmany joins us. She's a senior portfolio manager at Invesco. Kristina, as a senior portfolio manager, what does your portfolio look like these days? How is it allocated? How is it structured? How's your portfolio structured today?
Of course. So thank you guys so much for having me in. So I work on our global debt team, and so our universe that we look at is rates, currencies, and FX globally, and rates, currencies, and credit. And I think when we look at the world right now, one of the primary drivers, we're finally at this precipice of the Fed starting their easing cycle. So many other central banks have been waiting for their cues from the Fed, especially the emerging market central banks that started their easing early and now have been kind of waiting. So there's a big focus on currencies, especially right now, because I think that's where the big driver is, and it's U.S. central of what's driving it and where are we going from here. And I think when we look at rates, especially in developed markets, it's a little less interesting from what do we want to own out the curve, because there's not a lot of value of how low rates still are and how flat and inverted the curves are.
So, all right, so I could sit, as Tom knows, I'm happy to sit in my 2-year treasury getting near 4%. How much credit, I assume you guys are not just doing that. You're taking some credit risk maybe. How do you think about that?
We are. So you said you'd be happy to sit in the front end.
Sure.
And I think that makes sense when we look at rates. And in a lot of sense, it makes sense when we look at credit as well. You can be parked in front end high grade credit and even emerging market high grade credit in the front end. And we think there's some value there. But again, out the curve, things are a lot richer, and we don't think that there's a lot of value. Just as we have this normalization, we need to have a reprice there.
But I'm looking at the U.S. Corporate High Yield Index, the Bloomberg U.S. Corporate High Yield Index. We paid good money for that index, 6.29%. That is nice. How do you like to think about high yield?
But again, if you think about cash, where you're getting for your cash earnings too, it's really about spread. And I think there is this concept in the market of investors do care about all-in yield, but I think you have to break it down and look at spreads, and spreads are at historically tight levels. I mean, we had a little bit of blowing out with the noise early in August. Yeah, but the quickness with which we snapped back, I think, is telling of what is positioning out there. What do we need to be concerned with? Are you susceptible to this again?
To translate that, the bid was put in non-full faith and credit paper, snapped right back like equities?
Yeah.
Why? What is the reason for the bid there? Is it just desperation to capture coupon? Fibonacci 101, what's the why of
I think it's a combo of both. I think that there's when you have just cash returns where they are, funds perpetually have money that they need to invest. Right. And I think that there's a comfort, which is where we kind of fall down the middle on the economic outlook, that we're not looking for a recession. We think that the Fed has this balance. They're going to start. The question of 25 or 50 is not about a recession to us. It's about we've been tight long enough and we can kind of adjust.
I mean 2 years ago, my essay of the year was Lawrence McDonald, the author, writing out just an incredibly clear dissertation of the wall of money that's out there. You're in the turret at Invesco of guessing where that money's going to flow. Adjust that now post Labor Day. Where is the wall of cash going to flow?
So I think September, every year in September, you have massive amount of corporate supply. So certainly that will be a recipient. And then I think it really is about this. What defines the month of September will be the Fed beginning their easing cycle. That has been this 2-year waiting period of, is the Fed going to go? Are we on the precipice of recession? Do we have to go? And I think that allows people to put money back into the market and say, what are we comfortable with? Where do we want to
But Paul, good morning, Larry McDonald. I mean, he hasn't done anything since that essay of the year. He just checked out. He's been on the beach. But Paul, to me, the heart of the matter is the importance of September.
Yeah,
is a signal.
I know. Hopefully, we'll have a smooth month. Kristina, how do you think this Fed's going to proceed here? Do you think they start this month and then, I don't know, every meeting, every other meeting, 50 basis points, 25 basis points? How are you guys on your desk thinking about that?
So I think Friday's payroll report will be really important to just set the tone.
Again, I'm in the office Friday, just pointing it out to everybody.
And in some sense, it is silly that we are, even at this point, for the start of a cycle that has been years in the making, we're concerned about a data print that's a few days away.
Right.
But again, our view is that we're talking about a soft landing, and I'd say our base case is still that we're going to get more of a mid-cycle adjustment from the Fed rather than that they need to ease to neutral, which means you probably, if they start with a 50, you might get 100 by year end, 100 basis points. But I think that that's really the outlook into 25 is a lot less clear because you need election results and what has that adjustment.
I mean, Kristina Campmany, this is, we don't do anything here. All we do is read questions from YouTube. This is from YouTube. Please comment on portfolios for individuals separating out risk assets. I don't have 50% of my money in fixed income, but I don't have 100% in equities. I mean, is like 60-40 part of the Invesco discussion, or have you come up with new math?
I think that still is kind of how we think about the balance. And I think the difference in this day and age where we've returned after the GFC and you've had this extended period of near zero front-end rates, cash as an allocation in that mix for the individual makes sense too, right, to balance.
Are there sectors in the fixed income space that screen well for you guys at Invesco these days?
So again, when we look, I think when we look at particular opportunities in the market, in rates, it's more of a curve trade and that readjustment. Currencies look interesting to us because we think in either case, you have this push and pull of what has buoyed the dollar, and you've had U.S. exceptionalism, but the other side of it is you have massive funding needs from the government and all this treasury issuance that needs to be funded. We think that as you embark on this easing cycle, you could have a period of a weaker dollar, and thus there's a lot of currencies that are interesting to us. And then emerging market fixed income as well, local market debt also looks interesting because the Fed starts, these emerging market central banks can continue their easing cycles, and you have some opportunity there.
One final question. Are you managing for coupon or total return?
Total return. It always has to be about total return.
It has to be. You can't get a job. Yeah, okay.
See, that's
Kristina Campmany, thank you so much with Invesco. Just brilliant there. We really tried to do this morning. Eric and the team did a great job. The interns, are they still with us?
No, they're gone.
They're gone. They're like, you know, they're like
Eric and Ari. I mean, that's all we got left.
That's all we got left.
That's all we got left.
It's like,
it's not good.
It's a miracle every day.
Yep.
Kristina, Bob's going to help you out here. Bob's new. He knows where the door is, I think. I don't know. Yeah, he's great. We got Bob here because he knows Boston.
Yeah.
We're going to be on 92.9 FM. I said,
big signal.
Can you get a slug that actually knows Boston here?
Yep.
So, you know, he's talking to me about the Burger King at $4.95 and $24. He says they do so much business that the hamburgers are always fresh.
Nice.
And that's all he's worth. You know, I mean, there's that, and that's about it. Futures, they improve a little bit fractionally. Negative 26. The VIX, 16.40. With our news from New York City, Mark.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Thousands of Israeli protesters have called on their government to reach a hostage and ceasefire deal with Hamas after the Israeli military recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who'd been held by the militant group. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insists Israeli troops will remain in Gaza while Hamas says it wants a complete Israeli withdrawal.
We're asked to make concessions? What message does this send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages.
President Biden is looking to step up the pressure on Israel and Hamas to come to an agreement to release the hostages Hamas is still holding after last October's attack. Senior U.S. officials claim President Biden is considering presenting a final proposal to Israel and Hamas, and if that falls apart, it could mean the end of the U.S.-led negotiations. Kamala Harris kicked off the final sprint of the presidential campaign with a Labor Day appearance in the so-called Blue Wall state of Pennsylvania. Terry Haynes, founder of Pangea Policy, says the Keystone State could be the key in November.
The entire game in Pennsylvania is going to be essentially two things. One is maximizing the vote in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia suburbs, and the other thing is to cut into Trump enthusiasm in the rest of the state. And she's got her work cut out for her in the second part. So, at best right now, she's tied in Pennsylvania, I think.
Terry Haynes of Pangea Policy was a guest on Bloomberg Surveillance. Kamala Harris also visited the key state of Michigan. Pope Francis has arrived in Indonesia. He is hoping to encourage its Catholic communities and celebrate the tradition of interfaith harmony in a country with the world's largest Muslim population. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom Paul Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Good morning. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto are killing me. And all of our internet stuff. I don't understand how big we are. Good morning. 84 degrees. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. It's Rimini Beach, Italy.
Okay.
They're listening on the beach.
No, they're not.
They don't do Labor Day in Italy. Every day's beach day in
Every
Italy.
day's beach day.
So there we are, Rimini Beach. Good
All right.
morning in Italy. I'll look it up on the map, I promise, as well. I watched F1 this weekend. Did you guys watch it by any chance?
I'm impressed. Paul, you got to check this out, man. This is great.
I was blown away by the emotion of the last 30 minutes, 20 minutes of the race.
Yeah.
The Leclerc, who's like a home guy, I mean, he's in Monaco, but he's in Italy. It's at Monza, Italy, which is like Fenway Park, and not New Yankee Stadium, thank you. And at the end of the race, there was, I'm going to say 100,000 people, 80,000 people on the track singing the Italian national anthem.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable for Ferrari.
It is when you are in front of the home crowd and you hook it up. Heck yeah, man. And I'll let you in on another secret that happened over the weekend. The Southern 500 was run in NASCAR.
No, I missed this, please. NASCAR, I mean, come on. At Monza, they're going through those little curly Q corners, downshifting from 200 miles an hour. NASCAR's just turn left, right?
Oh, man, don't. I'm sorry. I opened my mouth.
Well, I don't watch Formula One, but I own it. Liberty Media.
Yep.
It's like the one thing working for John
FWONK is the ticker. They own Liberty. They own Formula One. Stock's up 23% this year. It's got a $19 billion market cap. John Malone owns Formula
So
One.
it's doing better than Warner Brothers Discovery.
It's doing great. Yes.
Can you imagine the next phone call between Mr. Malone and Mr. Zaslav?
Yeah. Give me back my money. So
it's going to be interesting to say that. Anyways, good morning. Thank you. Gallon on Rimini Beach in Italy. I think I'm probably butchering. I'll
Google this one.
Probably butchering it as well. Futures negative 26, the VIX 16.42. The Sweeney yield, that 2-year yield, 3.91%. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. All right, to futures we go, which are falling. Traders getting ready for what's typically considered the most challenging month for stocks. Right now, NASDAQ futures down about 0.5%. We have Dow futures, S&P futures down about 0.4%. The two-year yield at 3.91%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.88%, and that is down about 1 basis point. Shares of Intel lower, down 1%. A report from Reuters that CEO Pat Gelsinger and a few key executives are going to be meeting with its board later this month to present a plan to cut costs. And shares of Tesla up nearly 1%. Data from the China Passenger Car Association, it showed that it sold 3% more China-made cars in August from a year earlier, 17% more than the previous month. And this new workplace trend, if you're scared to tell the boss that you're quitting, well, the Wall Street Journal says there's a service for that. Quitting agencies. They've been gaining in popularity, especially in Japan. People pay them about $200 to tell their boss that they are done. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
All right. I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go with that.
Speechless.
Speechless.
You pay $200
to hire someone to tell your boss that you quit.
Don't you like doing that?
Because they don't like doing it, because then they don't have to deal with the whole thing with your boss saying, well, if we do this and that, maybe you'll stay.
I remember the first time I
quit.
And they said, you're making a huge mistake. And I was crushed. And I thought I was going to die. And then the second time I quit, they said, you're making a huge mistake. And I said, wait, I've heard that before. And by the third time, I was expecting to hear it. And I'm going to Bloomberg. You're making a huge mistake.
See? There you go.
I didn't have to pay $200.
There you go.
Is a fee. We wanted to get this in. Something happened over the weekend, which is jaw-dropping. I grew up in a house that revered a guy named Konrad Adenauer, who was the founder of the German experiment. I think I can say that with some authority in the 50s and the 60s. This weekend, Germany reverted back to a 1945. And what's interesting about it, not only did they revert back to a far right doing better than good, but also a far left doing better than good. Kriti Gupta studied this for us. We're thrilled she could brief us today. The German election, this is a regional election, Kriti. The German election is, I guess, in a year or two. Is Mr. Scholz a lame duck because of what happened this weekend?
He might as well be, and he's having a really hard time convincing everyone otherwise. It's not just having ripple effects within Germany, it's having ripple effects across the continent. This idea that, put this alongside some of the drama you're seeing in French politics as well, the core of Europe is weak. There's no real leadership, not to mention a real lack of leadership out of Brussels as well as they're getting the commission together. So for Olaf Scholz, this has really been an eye-opener. But if you talk to geopolitical strategists, Tom, they're going to say this is actually, these state elections that have leaned far right are actually a canary in the coal mine. It's representative of a trend that's been underway for over a decade now.
So, Kriti, what's behind this trend? Is it economics? Is it immigration? Is it other social issues? What's behind the rise of the far right in certain parts of Germany?
You know, Paul, I think you're going to find a lot of commonalities to exactly what's happening right in the States, which is this idea that there is growing frustration in some of the more rural communities, growing frustration among a demographic that is largely lower income, that's working class, and especially in this part of the world as well, where there is a severe kind of difference, a marked difference between what used to be the former kind of Western Berlin and Western Germany state versus the Eastern, more communist ruled state as well, where they are really fighting this idea of being treated and being viewed, and at least in their words, as second-class citizens. So it's this kind of turmoil that's been fueling it for a while. I'll also add, this is partially economic. We like to talk a lot about kind of the green transition here. Remember, this is a part of Germany and a part of Europe that has really felt the pain in things like natural gas flows from Russia.
My amateur take, Kriti, and we're thrilled you're in London, we're really leaning on this. But my amateur take is you say it's every nation in Europe, all with different flavors, Poland and the United Kingdom and that. Am I correct that maybe the poster child for adapting to this new polarity is Italy, where they're aggressively saying we're going to change policy, where everybody else is tiptoeing through the tulips?
I think that's a very fair assessment, and I'll throw not only Italy in there, but I'll throw Greece in there, I'll throw Spain in there. And the reason I do that, which I think for a lot of kind of financial veterans like yourself, that'll kind of ring some alarm bells from the debt crisis of over 10 years ago. But the reason I say this, and this is coming down to kind of a lot of the migration debate and the manufacturing debate that is showing up in Germany, which is that whereas Germany, and especially with these state elections, arguably France as well, with the rise of the far right, is really pushing back against the immigration story. The periphery countries that were kind of the black sheep of 10 years ago, they're not. They're embracing it. They're capitalizing on it, and they're mobilizing a growing migrant force. And that's the difference right now between a core and a periphery, where the periphery is actually outperforming.
So, Kriti, I mean, this, as you mentioned, you draw the parallels to the U.S. Is this movement, or I guess some of the ascendancy of the far right, is that a European-wide phenomenon, do you think? Because it seems like we're seeing it in Germany, we're seeing it in France. It seems pretty pronounced.
It is pretty pronounced. The handful of places that you're not seeing, and you're not seeing it in Spain right now, where you are seeing parts of Spain that are trying to kind of separate, but that's been a story that's been in the works for about 10 years now. You're also not seeing it in the UK, where, of course, we've just come off of a election where the Conservative Party posted a very almost embarrassing defeat. And that, of course, is playing into Keir Starmer's favor. Whether or not they can do anything about it, given kind of the lack of fiscal headroom and budget handcuffs, if you will, that's a different story.
And then there's the way Tottenham's playing. Kriti, the Olympics are over in Paris. Brief our American audience on there's always a post-Olympic overhang. How bad is the overhang for Macron? How do you say that in that'd be the Le Hang d'Oeuvre? How is the Le Hang d'Oeuvre for Macron going into Q4?
Well, I'll start with the fact that Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, has actually said the Olympic rings are staying on the Eiffel Tower, which is being received with some mixed feelings on both sides of the Atlantic. Yeah, she's making the statement, and it's not against.
What's that about?
Well,
it's un-American.
but to your point, on Macron, this basically the message is we now have to get back to business, because during the Olympics they basically put a freezing on things like finding a new prime minister, tackling the budget, dealing with pension reform. They were saying we need to enjoy the Olympics, a very European take. And now that is over, they're really focusing on who that next prime minister will be. The thing is, the irony I almost find is that Macron is a centrist president. He's dealing with a parliament that has leaned far left. He's dealing with the rise of the far right in Marine Le Pen, and he's still refusing to basically choose a prime minister. His argument is that they're all going to be met with no confidence votes. The public's argument is that Macron is not honoring the parliament that the French people voted for. So a lot of tension here, but something that could change in the coming days.
Kriti Gupta, thank you so much. Off of Queen Victoria Street this morning in London. And yeah, I think these are stories, folks, particularly off the Labor Day weekend, that were peripheral. But, you know, you look at a far-right win in Germany, regional election, East Germany, challenged to say the least. Paul, when somebody says since 1945, that gets your attention.
You know, I mean, I learned a lot from co-hosting a show with Matt Miller. He spent so much time in Germany. He was explaining to me how that Eastern-Western split, even though the wall is down, it's still very much there. It's economics, it's social, and there is a divide there between the East and the West. And we saw a little bit of it over the weekend time with this election here. So it's worth paying attention to for, one of the largest economies out there.
A lot of fun to all of you up in New England. We're having fun today across this nation in 3 hours, 92.9 FM in Boston. Joe Matthew leading us off with Balance of Power. We're having fun with it. And what's great about this is, there's a whole Boston music culture. And there were the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. There were these guys in a basement in Quincy, Massachusetts, and the Boss Tones said, "Dropkick what? We can have them. They become ginormous." Dropkick Murphys.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. For the first time since 4th of July, well, the Thursday before 4th of July.
Extended break.
We're all together here. Sweeney rumored to be here Friday, Jobs Day. Really big economic data. The sequence here is like September 4, I'm off tomorrow. I got to take afterthought to school.
Okay.
We're now now in a block and a half rule. It used to be I could be like 20 feet behind.
Now it's a block and a half.
Walking to school. Now I got to be a block and a half behind.
And you're still not going to be
visual sighting.
Yeah. You're still going to stick out there, Tom.
We'll take a photo in front of a brass plaque.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be, see ya. I'm going to go down to Eli's and have a martini.
There you go.
At 8 a.m. just to get through. Oh, my God. They're going back. To all of you taking first graders and kindergarten types to school, it's magical.
Good for you.
Some in the South have done it.
Yep.
Already as well. Futures down 34. Do we have a reason?
No, it's okay. And we had a strong week last week here, but we got a lot of economic data, Tom, as you were mentioning here, coming this week. Then, of course, the Fed, September 18th. We'll see how our friends at the Fed do.
Gura will be here. I think he's back from Maine.
Okay.
He's going to be here later. Dean Kernet on the dynamics of the volatility of the markets. Really looking forward to that. Matt Hornbach of Morgan Stanley. We're going to start strong with Brent Schutte here with Northwestern Mutual in a moment. Spending a lot of time today on what's the new allocation? We're out on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts on YouTube. We're out on 92.9 FM in Boston, 12 noon today. Joe Matthew leading us off there. Huge new signal from Mount Katahdin. And someone, do you get to Calais on the Canadian border? I said, nah,
I don't know about that one.
You got to use Android Auto and YouTube up in Calais. Yeah, that's how they pronounce it up there.
Really?
That's
okay,
where
very
FDR
good.
used to go. It's like way up. It's
really? I didn't know that.
2/3 of the way to Nova Scotia. I've never been there, but that's what I'm told. It's interesting. It's like, New Year's. Happy New Year's, everybody. We say Happy New Year's to Interactive Brokers. Their support, foundational to Bloomberg Surveillance. We're brought to you this morning by Interactive Brokers Portfolio Analyst. Consolidate. Analyze all your financial accounts on one powerful dashboard. Do it for free. Sign up for Portfolio Analyst, ibkr.com/free PA. One more time. I got to do this for Lisa since she hasn't been here in a month.
No.
ibkr.com/free PA. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We've got red on the screen this morning on this holiday shortened trading week. Right now, NASDAQ futures down about 0.7%, 150 points. Dow futures down 0.5%, 227 points. S&P futures down 0.5% or 33 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.89%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.87%, and that's down 3 basis points. To currencies, Japanese yen rallied. The Bank of Japan governor said the central bank will continue to raise interest rates if the economy and prices perform as expected. Right now, up about 0.7% at 145.78 against the dollar. The euro, British pound weaker. Bitcoin up about 0.3% at 59,000. Shares of U.S. Steel, they're now down more than 3%. Vice President Kamala Harris said she opposed the sale of the Pennsylvania-based company to Japan's Nippon Steel. And other companies making news, that's DirecTV. It couldn't reach a new distribution deal with Disney. Because of that, a lot of subscribers, millions lost their access to channels, including ESPN, ABC over the weekend. Needless to say, those watching the U.S. Open were not happy about it. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. I got all sorts of cardinal rules when I do lectures. People go like, what are you doing? And I have one word, anything in literature of economics, finance, investment. If I see the word hope, I circle it. Hope. Hold on to your wallet if you see the word hope. Brent Schutte, Northwestern. We still hold large caps, but we are cautious given their high valuations. There are a lot of hopes baked in. Brent, define the hope of the Mag 7 and how you deal with it as an adult where you got to participate, but?
Yeah, so I mean, to me right now, there's a lot of hope in those large cap stocks that they will deliver earnings in the future. That shows up in the form of valuations, which are elevated across the board for large cap stocks. And you contrast that with other parts of the market that people haven't liked, where there's not much hope, which are small caps and mid caps, which have been trading as if there's been a recession. Certainly their earnings have been weaker. But this is where we think there's opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years for people who are able to venture outside those areas, take a longer term look, and think about what could be in the future. That's where I want people to continue to position in that manner, just because I'm fearful right now that a soft landing is priced in. It is certainly not a certainty, at least based upon history. And you see the sentiment of investors right now at really, really elevated levels, which worries me also. And so I guess that's my comment on hope. I do believe that there are opportunities, just more cautious in the near term.
All right, Brent, so to the extent you want to think about small to mid-cap stocks over the next 3 to 5 years, are there sectors that screen well for you guys these days, or are you strictly going on valuation?
Going much more on valuation and history. I mean, look, this is a reminder that this looks a lot like 1999 to 2000, where the market was similarly expensive, with a lot of hope baked into stocks that ended up being good companies, but not good stocks. And that, to me, is where I think there's room for other things to outperform in the future. And so we do take much more of a valuation approach because we do look a little bit longer term. And that's where opportunities are right now, even though those aren't popular.
Right.
And my biggest fear is that at the end of an economic cycle, which I still think we're near to one, not further from one, at the end of an economic cycle, people swear off diversification. They take more risk. They become more concentrated in things that they think are no-brainers, which I think later on they have to admit they weren't using that part of their head.
Looking at the Milwaukee Brewers dashing, playing 587 baseball to October, Brent Schutte, what inning of this bull market are we in?
I think we're towards the end. I'm actually, unfortunately, a Cardinal fan, so I went to the game yesterday.
Well, I know that. I just want to harass you about it. Yeah.
Rubbing it in, Tom. I think we're later. I mean, look, this has every textbook end of economic cycle type of environment, especially in the markets where there are people concentrating, where the markets have become really, really, really narrow. And I think people forget that every economic cycle, so the next economic cycle, at least in the last 50 years, has always had new leadership. And the leaders of the last economic cycle often become the laggards. And that's where I want people to stay true to investing and stay true to the discipline of actually diversification. And I cringe every time I hear the word diversification, Tom, which you can add to your things that you don't like hope. Hold on to your wallet.
Yeah, I got to get this question in. Paul's got some adult questions. What in God's name happened to the Cardinals? I was watching this weekend. You got to watch Cardinal balls. Good morning, KMOX, out in the great state of Missouri. Brent Schutte, what happened to the Cardinals? The stadium was almost empty.
I have never seen it that empty as I saw it on TV the last few weeks, and so I'm not for sure what happened. They just, I think the fan base is used to winning, and the last couple of years have been a bit more challenging.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds like he's on ESPN there.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So, Brent, what do you think about just, I don't know, technology? I mean, it seems like as long as we can remember, technology has been the leader for this market. Well, technology and AI, and is that still the leader for this market?
Look, I think leadership is changing one way or the other. I think rates are going lower, whether it be through a recession or through a soft landing. And to me, rates going lower means there is a new regime change from asset classes. That's where I think things like small and mid cap will do well either way, because the valuation is so discounted relative to large caps. And if history is any guide, that typically provides outperformance. It's just not immediate. And sometimes people lose the ability to be patient, which is, again, one of those things where Tom needs to hold onto his wallet.
Exactly. All right, Brent, thanks so much for joining us. Brent Schutte, he's a Chief Investment Officer, Northwestern Mutual, based there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Again, pound for pound, I say, some of the smartest money managers in the world in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Paul, Tom, and Lisa. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that 2 Russian ballistic missiles have struck a military training facility and nearby hospital in a central eastern region of Ukraine. At least 41 people have been killed, 180 others wounded. Officials said today that the strike occurred in Poltava. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing back against a new wave of pressure to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza after hundreds of thousands of Israelis protested and went on strike after the discovery of 6 more dead hostages. Vice President Kamala Harris held Labor Day campaign events with union chiefs in 2 critical swing states, including a joint appearance with President Biden in Pennsylvania, as she seeks to strengthen her standing with blue-collar workers. Speaking at a union local in Pittsburgh, Harris came out against the planned sale of United States Steel to a Japanese buyer.
I couldn't agree more with President Biden. U.S. Steel should remain American-owned and American-operated.
Meanwhile, former President Trump, who was off the campaign trail Monday, instead took to social media to attack Harris on the economy, saying all Americans are suffering during this holiday weekend. High gas prices, transportation costs are up, and grocery prices are through the roof. With only 63 days left until the election, polls continue to show the economy as the number one issue on voters' minds. But Henrietta Trey's with Veda Partners says that's no longer a reliable indicator.
If you like Donald Trump, you think the economy is trash and we're going to a recession. If you like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, you think the economy is improving. You feel good about your own personal finances. You feel good about your state's personal finances. And you feel like the inflation issue is coming down, which it is at 2.9%.
Henrietta Trey's with Veda Partners says immigration and abortion rights are likely to be the more potent issues driving voters to the polls this November. Global news, 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
You see it everywhere, Paul, and help me out here. Yep. I mean, we had Ed Yardeni in for 30 minutes a couple days ago. This is from Barron's, Jacob Sonnenschein. Why the S&P 500 could hit 6,000 by year end. Wow. I mean, it's out there in the zeitgeist. It's not now a rare thing. You know, here at 5,600, somebody go 5,800.
Right.
6,000. It's like now, I guess it's exuberance. Did you sense exuberance this weekend?
I did not, although, I mean, it's interesting. You think about it, Tom. I mean, that's only a 7% move from where we are right here. And you think about it, we had, double-digit earnings growth in the past quarter, like Gina Martin-Adams from Bloomberg Intelligence said we would see. And we've got a Fed that I guess is going to start cutting rates in September in a couple of weeks. So you put those two together, does that argue for a higher market? Maybe so.
Global slowdown, Brent crude 74.71, erasing its year gains below 75. Brent, West Texas Intermediate, do we have to start talking $69?
I think we might, Tom. $71.25 for WTI crude oil, $3.17 at the BP station on Route 35 in Wall Township.
Where's Tucker?
I don't know where Tucker. He's just.
Is he like MIA?
Yeah.
I mean, does he takes? Oh, he's got
in the newsroom. He's a news guy.
He's doing my review, is what he's doing. I got to do my review with John Tucker. It's always painful as well. We did it on the deck last year, which was very successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, the avocado lobster thing.
Nice, very good.
It's good. Yeah, Red Oak
cocktail of your choice.
Yep. That's a good review. Futures deteriorate, so does this radio program. Negative 35. The VIX 16.60. Again, in less than 3 hours. Joe Matthew, perfectly timed. Joseph Matthew, Balance of Power. Look for that across the nation. Look for that in New England, 92.9 FM in Boston. Thrilled to launch that here at 12 noon. Bitcoin, have to quote it for Sweeney, keep me happy, 59,000 on Bitcoin. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red on the screen as investors kind of wait that key jobs report Friday could set the market tone for the rest of the year. The government also issues July job vacancies this week. Today, though, it kicks off with a read on U.S. manufacturing. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures down 0.7%, Dow futures down 0.5%, S&P futures down about 0.6%. The 2-year yield at 3.89%, that's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.85%. That's down 5 basis points. To commodities, oil prices falling. Concerns over Chinese demand. Right now, Brent crude falls below $75 a barrel. Right now at $74.65 a barrel. WTI crude, $71 a barrel. Companies making news. Volkswagen, company considering closing factories in Germany for the first time in its 87-year history to cut costs. Shares in Germany down about 0.5%. And a recall from German car maker BMW. It's for 140,000 of its electric minis due at a risk of battery fires. Shares down 1% in Germany. And Reuters reporting Tesla planning to produce a 6-seat version of its Model Y car in China from late 2025. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. Again, here coming up in the opening, futures at negative 35. Joining us now, I just have to say this, Paul. I didn't really realize the compression of economic data first of the month.
Yeah.
And it's like there's no break. There's ISM here. You have that at 10 o'clock.
Yep.
Is Alex Steele, is she darkened the door?
Alex Steele is back. We are at full strength at 10 a.m.
You got ISM, which is a huge deal. Pharaoh looks at it more than I do, but I guess it's a big deal. Jolts tomorrow.
I like Jolts.
And there's a bunch of other stuff. Then ADP, we go right into it.
Yep.
September 5th, and then claims, and then 165,000 non-farm payrolls where we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's a positive number. It's not the 220,000 that we've seen on a rolling basis over the past number of months, but still growing payrolls.
Joining us right now, very important conversation. Matt Hornbach joins us right now, Global Head of Macro Strategy at Morgan Stanley. Matt, do you have to aggressively rewrite your macro strategy into Q4?
Tom, thanks for having me on the program. I don't think we're going to have to aggressively rewrite the outlook. I mean, the risks that we put out there relative to our baseline forecasts were pretty clear in that we did see downside risks to the U.S. Treasury yields. And so I don't think we'll have to dramatically change the narrative as those risks are now being realized. But we probably will have to make some adjustments to our baseline yield forecast at some point here soon.
Right. With your world-class view of Japan earned at Morgan Stanley, is it all quiet on the Japanese front?
Well, for now, yes, it seems to be. But our economists do think the Bank of Japan will have the data it needs to raise rates once more, but only once more. And I think in order to get investors really excited about Japan in 2025, you're going to need more than just one more rate hike from the Bank of Japan. So for now, we think it's going to be pretty quiet, but it could get interesting, particularly because positioning in the market vis-a-vis Japan still exists. It's still a story people want to trade. That means people want to see yields in Japan go higher. They want to see the yen continue to depreciate, and it could get interesting because those hopes and dreams may come crashing down if inflation in the country starts to moderate again.
So, Matt, I'm just, I know you spend a lot of time back and forth stationed in Tokyo. And I remember when Tokyo was the place to be outside of New York. Why are investors paying so much attention to Japan over the last 12, 18, 24 months, even Warren Buffett, when for 20 years we could care less what happened to Japan? What's changed?
Well, yeah, I mean, Japan is definitely a good place to be for your personal life, but you're right. I think one of the things that has changed is the inflationary environment in Japan has shifted pretty dramatically over the past couple of years. Bear in mind that for the better part of the 2.5 or 3 lost decades that we had in the country of Japan, that inflation couldn't get out of bed for anyone. And now we finally have inflation that at one point was higher than 2% on the underlying measures that you can look at. That's now come down a bit below 2%, but nevertheless, it's really an inflation story.
Is the Fed the central banker to the world? I mean, the global mandate that you've got there with the terrific economic work of Morgan Stanley, and that, is it a pivot point around Jerome Powell in the Fed, or is it more diffuse now in terms of monetary dynamics?
Well, I think certainly today the focus has really been on the Fed, and that's somewhat a shame, because you do have a lot of different central banks around the world doing different things with their monetary policy toolkits, and so yes, it's true that the ECB is easing, and the Bank of Canada is easing, and the Bank of England is easing policy, but they're kind of going about it all somewhat differently, and I think that's a pretty unique environment, certainly for the past half a decade or two, or a full decade.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty unique that they're all doing slightly different things.
What's the character of this bull market that you see?
Well, look, this is at the moment a slightly different bull market for bonds than we've seen historically, mostly because the yield curve remains very inverted. This is not common. This happens less than 10% of the time, going back as far as the data will allow us to go back on the yield curve. This is a pretty unique period of time for the Treasury market. Right. And so, this bull market ultimately is being held back to a certain degree by the inversion of the yield curve. It makes owning Treasury securities less attractive when the yield curve is inverted.
But then what's the dynamic of a disinverting yield curve? The fact is, through August, we see massive 2s10 disinversion, right?
For 2s10s, absolutely right, Tom. I think a lot of investors who have increasingly been going into money market funds are not really comparing the 10-year yield to the 2-year yield these days. They're really comparing the 10-year yield to what they can get in a money market fund. And that yield curve is still extraordinarily inverted. So you're right. 2s10s, not so much anymore.
Matt, thanks to the clinic. Matt Hornbach with a brief there, Morgan Stanley Global Research this morning here on how we fit in. I mean, it goes back to Bill Rhodes, central banker to the world.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
I love Bill Rhodes.
I think it's underplayed right now. Jay Powell on September 18th is talking to the world, not just the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the expectation is after several years of really aggressively raising rates and then keeping rates higher. Here we've got a Federal Reserve that appears to be ready to start cutting rates.
So what happens the day after? On September 19th, the 47 countries get out front, boom. Everybody comes down.
Yeah, and as Damien Sassauer has been telling us, some of his emerging markets have already been cutting interest rates there. So, but we'll see what the rest of the world does. But again, the Fed, we're looking forward to a lower rate environment going forward.
We're doing orientation today at high school.
Okay.
For orientation, afterthought, they line up an ice cream truck in front of the school.
Of course they do.
My orientation used to be, can you try to use soap in the locker room?
Right.
We put soap in, especially for you idiots this year.
Yep, exactly.
So, Lisa, what do they do for orientation in your kids' schools?
Not much. Well, we already started.
You started
in
before
New Jersey.
Labor Day.
Yeah, we started before Labor Day.
That's scholars there.
That's
scholars
they were not happy
in New
about
Jersey,
it.
Tom.
That's un-American.
They were not happy about it.
In California, they start mid-August.
Yeah.
It's that's crazy. I don't know what
You
to say.
started before Labor Day in New Jersey?
The Thursday before Labor
Is there
Day
a
in
why?
New Jersey. They just say get the kids ready, like
get a jump start.
Jump start.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can go in on Tuesday, like
Send them all to the principal's office.
Yep.
Futures at -31. Need to get the market open here. We do that across this nation. In Boston, 12 noon, 92.9 FM. Joe Matthew, good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Some more economic data due on this holiday shortened trading week. All eyes, of course, looking forward to Friday's key jobs report, but that's not all. About 15 minutes from now, we'll get a read on manufacturing. The week also brings figures on July job vacancies as well, factory and durable goods orders. But the markets are open, so let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500, down 0.6%, 32 points at 5,615. The Dow down 0.5%, 190 points, 41,358. We have the Nasdaq down 0.7%, 131 points at 17,582. The 2-year yield 3.88%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.85%. That's down 5 basis points. To commodities, have to point out oil, Brent crude $74 a barrel, WTI crude $71 a barrel. We have spot gold lower at $2,491 an ounce. Also at the open, want to check in with U.S. Steel. Those shares down 4%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Brent crude down almost $3, 74.66. Got a global slowdown sort of feel when you look across equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. Somewhere in the vicinity of the first week of August, I said, is Dean Kernan around? And he wasn't around because the Kernan household was packing for a daughter off to school. Did you survive? It was a daughter that you took to school? A son.
Yep.
That's better than a daughter, right?
A little easier.
Do you take a moving van now, or can you still squeeze it into some kind of SUV?
For the son, you can. For the daughter, it's
Daughter
going to
will
be a
take a
van.
moving van. You survive. Well, that's good to see. But I'm thinking early August, VIX out to 65. Paul lived it. I had the day off for some crazy reason. Dean Kernan, I've been dying to ask you this. Was it a flash crash?
In some ways it was. I think each of these events teaches us something. I think we're supposed to observe the action and really the breakdown in what I would just call the absolute most consequential market for financial product insurance. The S&P options market is really what determines prices for the VIX. So to get to a 65 in the VIX, it's telling you that the prices of out-of-the-money puts on the S&P became almost unpriceable, that the folks who are charged with making prices consistently in this important insurance product were unable to. And I think there's information in that. I think it's not something we're supposed to forget. And as the VIX has settled so far back, really just a nudge above its starting point at the onset of August, at least from my perspective and the conversations I have with clients, we're supposed to look at August 5th not as a one-off, but potentially informative about some instability that lurks beneath the surface of the market.
Dean, you're CEO, founder of Macro Risk Advisors. What are the big macro risks that you're talking to your clients about these days?
So I'll throw the 4 E's at you.
Okay.
So we've got employment this Friday.
Okay.
We've got earnings season. 85% of the S&P will report by the next E, which is the election. And then, of course, we have the Fed's easing cycle and the extent to which the markets front-run that so far. You guys were talking about yield curve disinversions and so forth. There's obviously been a significant rally in the entirety of the yield curve, but really the sort of shorter end, let's say the 2-year segment, is telling you that the Fed is expected to ease something on the order of, I think, 9 times by the end of next year. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Sometimes they ease because they have to, sometimes they ease because they can, but it's certainly the case that Fed policy is in the crosshairs of market risk at this point as well.
You mentioned the election. My crystal ball is no better than anybody else's. How do you talk to your clients about, it could be, I mean, it's almost a binary situation about what happens come November than who is seated in January?
Right, and I think, what I would say is, again, forgetting about personalities and all of the poison that is in our, electorate, just in terms of how they view the candidates. With respect to policy, you had something in 2016 where folks were obviously very afraid of Trump, but he was pushing a giant corporate tax cut and got it through. And that was unambiguously positive for risk assets. 2017, the first year he really was in office, was the lowest realized vol in the S&P in 50 odd years. So sometimes we think things and they just turn out not to be the case.
Right.
I do think that there is some potential that the market views a Harris win as more negative for asset prices. She's been talking about raising the corporate tax rate. Obviously, you have the sunsetting of the Trump tax cuts on the individual basis.
Right.
But I think here's what I would say on asset prices and hedging. The October VIX futures are a really interesting product to look at because it embeds the election risk. And what I've learned about election risk in terms of market prices and specifically derivatives, things like Brexit, the 2016 election, the 2020 election in the US, and certainly this one as well, is that the supply of insurance capital, so the folks that are told to sell out of the money puts to clients like hedge funds, the Goldman Sachs trader who runs an S&P book as an example, that person's going to get tapped on the shoulder and said, listen, be careful. We don't really know what the outcome is going to be here. We don't know how the market's going to react. And so just simple supply and demand, the supply, the willingness to sell options ahead of the election goes down, the price of volatility goes up. And you're already seeing that in the October VIX future.
5 minutes into the session, futures have turned into a market a little bit worser. Negative 30 on futures is now negative 41 on SPX, down 145 points. VIX on a good stick, 16.80. Dean Kernert with us, Macro Risk Advisors. Is a 16 VIX now different than a 16 VIX of March of this year?
I think it is actually a little different. And so what I would say is the first is a little derivatives math is to take your 16, divide by 16, and that's your implied daily move. Okay, so a 16 VIX implies a 1% daily move in the S&P. How do you get to that 1%? The market's not saying, hey, the S&P is going to move 1%. It's basically saying, we're probably going to move 30, 40 basis points a day, but that risk of something that's an outsized move, probably a down move, that's where you start to get to larger numbers.
Long only buy side. I'm up in Boston. I'm running a portfolio. I got 38, 40, 50% of my portfolio in 10 stocks. How has the VIX changed by Mag 8, including Berkshire?
Yeah, profoundly, I would say. The
elasticities, though, to get pro here, the log normal dynamic of VIX at a certain single point has got to be different.
It's different because, as you mentioned, the Mag 8, the overlay of this AI theme on the market has been really interesting. And what it's really done is impact the correlation at the index level. The manner in which stocks are correlated has plummeted. So you've got some of the lowest levels of realized correlation stock to stock. And so what that's doing is it's stealing volatility at the index level. It's reducing volatility because stocks are so uncorrelated.
Katie up at Alpha Simplex up in Boston, she says, Tom, ask an intelligent question. Okay, so if the VIX is 16, it moves to 15, that's better, that's good, that's great. If the VIX is 16, it moves to 17, that's fearful. But to me, they're wildly asymmetric because of Mag 8. They're not, 1 point down is nowhere near the same as 1 point up.
Right, and I think, again, back to the way in which this Mag 8 is interacting with the rest of the market, but also with each other. One of the things I've been studying is just take NVIDIA and its correlation to Apple. It was actually running negative for a period of time. That's unheard of. To have the two largest stocks, both $3 trillion plus market caps, to be uncorrelated. If you think about the impact that that's having on overall levels of realized volatility in the S&P, it's significant. And why does that matter? It's because in today's day of investing, volatility is not just a statistic we watch, it's actually an input into how portfolios are sized, a mathematical input. So you lower the realized volatility and people get longer. They think they can run bigger levels of exposure because your value at risk is lower because vol is lower. And so one of the things, Tom, I think is a big unknown, but something we should be really watchful for is a shift in the correlation. So if the Mag 7, Mag 8 starts to get more correlated to the S&P, or if these names start to become more correlated to each other, we certainly got a glimpse of that on August 5th. that's going to add a lot of volatility to the index.
Real quickly, Dean, how concerned are you about that, I guess, concentration risk in this marketplace? It doesn't feel like it's healthy for the overall market.
Yeah, I would say a lot of hand-wringing on that so far, and so far so good, right?
Yep.
My count is the S&P's running a 2 Sharpe ratio for the year. Dare I say?
What does that mean?
So that's basically just taking your annualized return.
That means if I'm an active manager, my Bonai 1231 is going to be brutal.
Exactly. It means things are going well. You're getting a lot of return per unit of risk, and I just would say it's unsustainable. And so, my PSA, which is not a public service announcement, it's a put spread announcement, is there are some really interesting things to do at the index level out to year end to preserve your gains this year.
Okay, Dean Kerner, thank you so much. Don't be a stranger. Are you in New York? Like
Love
now,
seeing you, Tom.
I mean, you and the kids. You're up in Maine or wherever you are. That's all done. Are you back in the saddle now?
We're ready to go.
Program announcement. Dean Kernan back in the saddle. We'll have him in here early and often. Brockton, can you see if we can get Kernan for 2 blocks next time? Talk to his people.
Yep.
I don't know if they'll let him do it, but
He's got a green dot.
Our team is a disaster with the interns going back to school.
I know. I don't know what we're doing back there.
It's just a train wreck.
Yeah, got some old guys back there. We don't know what's going on.
I mean, Lisa had 2 interns. They're gone.
I know.
And they left early because she was on sabbatical.
Yep.
It's difficult. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. After 6 Israeli hostages were found shot dead in a Gaza tunnel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did something he had not done in 11 months of war. He apologized to the bereaved families. Still, in a defiant press conference, Netanyahu said Israel will not give up control of the border area between Gaza and Egypt, as Hamas has demanded. This as pressure to come from a ceasefire deal with Hamas is growing. We get more from Bloomberg's news editor for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, Rosalind Matheson.
The Israeli Prime Minister says that he feels that Israel's given enough ground there in the conversation and they're not willing to concede more. His concern is, some of the things that are on the table might allow Hamas potentially to regroup and to rearm and come back at Israel yet again in the aftermath of the October 7 attack. So he says he's got some lines in the sand in those conversations. So the question is, where do these conversations go from here?
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says a Russian missile strike has killed 41 people in the Ukrainian city of Poltava. Zelensky through an interpreter.
I have received preliminary reports on the Russian attack on Poltava. According to the information available now, 2 ballistic missiles hit the territory of an educational institution and a neighboring hospital.
Zelensky says 180 others were wounded. Tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela took a strange turn when the U.S. seized a plane used by Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and flew it to Florida. The seizure comes as the country is still reeling from their disputed elections earlier this year. Officials seized the jet, which was allegedly purchased, violating U.S. sanctions. Cathay Pacific Airways' inspection of its Airbus SE A350 fleet is focused on deformed and degraded fuel lines in the engines of the wide-body aircraft. The discovery of the issue caused multiple flight cancellations as engineers switched out parts. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Down 173. SPX down 44. Futures are negative 34, 33. Now down worser, negative 43 there as well. NASDAQ 100, a challenging moment, negative 1.2%. The VIX goes out. We're going to get a 17 print on the VIX. 16.99 is, well, I looked at some of your entertainment stocks. You mentioned John Malone.
Oh.
I mean, I don't care how old he is. There's a point where he's just going to say enough.
Enough. I mean, he's got Charter, big investment in Charter, big investment in Discovery, Warner Brothers, and so some phone calls are going to have to be made, I think, soon about stenching the. There's some issues there.
Sport to say the least. Brent crude down 3, 74.45.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks retreating, and this following a rally that put the S&P 500 close to all-time highs. Traders, well, they're geared up for a string of economic data. Any clues about the health of the economy, which comes to a high point on Friday with the jobs report. So right now we have the NASDAQ down 1%, 208 points. The Dow down 0.5% at 225 points. The S&P 500 down 0.7% or 43 points. The two-year yield at 3.88%. That's down 3 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 3.84%, and that's down 6 basis points. To commodities, we have spot gold lower, $2,482 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $74 a barrel. WTI crude, $70 a barrel. Over to currencies, the dollar is weaker. Japanese yen up 1%, 145.42 against the dollar. Euro, British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin down nearly 1% at 58,000. Shares of Cathay Pacific Airways, they're down about 0.6%. That's in Hong Kong after canceling dozens of flights because of engine issues with one of its Airbus 350 jets. Airbus down about 1% in Paris. Meanwhile, shares of Boeing, they're down about 6%. Wells Fargo gave the company a negative analyst rating, moving to underweight from equal weight. And Southwest, there's some good news, up 1%, an upgrade from Evercore ISI to outperform from inline. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. West Texas Intermediate just breaching $71 a barrel. We mentioned earlier to see 69 there would be a real shock. We're not there yet, but Brent crude down $3.11. So here's a date calendar today. First of all, afterthoughts and orientation today. School tomorrow. Big. I mean, these are huge moments. Then we got like a whole bunch of economic data. Thank you, Commonwealth, for your support. We get to Jobs Day. None of it matters because then, we get to the debate. Joining us now, surveillance debate correspondent, host of the Big Take, David Gura, joins us.
Orientation matters, I should say. I've been told that. I got to be there for it.
The ice cream truck is wheeled up in front of the school. What a con job. David, I got to ask you about what we witnessed over the weekend. I don't buy it for a minute. At the debate, everyone helping Trump, everyone helping Harris is going to say America doesn't care about foreign policy. Am I off the mark?
Well, I think that it's something you don't hear a lot about on the campaign trail traditionally, but what we had happen over the weekend is so tragic and heartbreaking and obviously kickstarted a fresh round of protests in Israel. It's something that's going to be front and center on everyone's mind this week and leading into the debate next week. So I suspect that they're going to be asked about it. We've already heard from former President Trump on social media, his take on sort of what led to that moment and what would have been different if he had been in the White House. So I think that they'll be asked about it. I think that we keep seeing these things that aren't customarily part of campaigns percolate up. Foreign policy, I would say this time around, is certainly one of them.
Does President Trump have a special relationship with Mr. Netanyahu?
They get along very well, and they have historically, although there was a breach in that relationship at the end of Donald Trump's term in office when Benjamin Netanyahu waited did not embrace what Donald Trump thought, which is that he won the election. Of course, he didn't. And that soured things. But the two of them have known each other for a long time and have a familiarity with one another. And I think it's safe to say that the former president feels like that relationship between the two of them is stronger than the one that has been tested, shall we say, between Netanyahu and Biden, Netanyahu and Harris over these last many months.
David, are we going to have a debate? When is it? And what should we expect?
Debate is going to be on Tuesday of next week in Philadelphia at Independence Hall, and obviously it's closely watched. We've heard that from both campaigns, of course. There was a lot of fighting over what it might look like, how it might take place, if it might take place. Both agreed to it, both see it as being important. We had a memo from the campaign chair for the Harris-Walz campaign over the weekend in which she acknowledged that this is going to be a really crucial moment for them to try to break through to this small sliver of undecided people. I mean, this memo from this campaign chair was so fascinating to me. So this is from Jen O'Malley Dillon, who was head of the Biden campaign previously. And she had a stunning acknowledgement in that memo, which is they see themselves as the clear underdogs here. And they also acknowledge the fact that this is going to be decided by a very razor-thin margin. So any moment like this, they see as an incredibly important opportunity to try to break through and again get to that small group of people.
Do we know is Vice President Harris, is she a good debater? Not a good debater? Is the expectation that she can go up against a very big presence like former President Trump?
She's done it before, so we think back to the vice presidential debate the last time around when she comported herself very well against Mike Pence, the former vice president, on the debate stage. Of course, she ran for president herself in 2019, didn't make it to 2020, but is a former prosecutor, of course, and has a very prosecutorial style. And I think that's something that came out and was a really interesting contrast in the one interview that she's done in recent days with CNN. She trying to be the one answering questions, not prosecuting the argument as she has. So it'll be interesting to see. And of course, that contrast is something that's so astonishing. And then, Paul, something that really stood out to me from that CNN interview was this admission on Vice President Harris's part that she's actually never met Donald Trump, never been in the same room as him. So that'll be a really kind of interesting dynamic to observe and watch as they take the stage in
Where are the
Philadelphia.
rules of the debate right now? Like, I thought the last time around was hermetically sealed. Would be my sophisticated
It seems
analysis.
less hermetically sealed than the CNN one, in which we were kind of held, the press was held in this building 500 yards away from the room in which the debate was taking place. I think we're still figuring out sort of what the rules are going to be in terms of who's let into the hall. I don't think that it'll be a boisterous rally type atmosphere. There will be kind of a pool of reporters and photographers who are going to be in the room for the debate itself.
Do they get to interrupt each other?
I think that that's still being debated, if you'll pardon the
Lisa and I
unintentional
have
pun.
that debate
The last argument was about mics and should they be muted the way in which they were in the last
So
debate.
what reporters like yourself, what do you do at this debate? What's your plan of action?
Again, the Atlanta one was so strange because we were in the Georgia Tech arena, seated around the concourse, watching it on the Jumbotron. That was tough for me
You
at
go
Tar
up the
Heel,
stairs of the Four Seasons Hotel. You go straight into the bar. They have this gorgeous bar. I've never been in the Atlanta Four Seasons where there wasn't somebody. Oh, hi. How you doing? Great, great, great. I mean, you watched.
I watched it in the arena, and then in Philadelphia, we'll see what it's like. But I was in the room, and then down on the spin room floor afterward. I think that'll be sort of the same trajectory.
Your plans for the big take into September, into Q4, David Gura?
Yeah, we are really going to be starting to draw. I mean, obviously, we talked about this last week when I was filling in for Paul. Labor Day is such a catalytic moment during a presidential campaign. Things really get up and running. We're going to be focusing a lot more on politics going forward here, so we'll definitely do an episode, at least an episode on that debate, and we're going to focus much more on the economic policies of both candidates going forward there.
Are you back from summer? I mean,
I'm back.
It's great.
I'm back.
Do you bring
no more
lobster
Fridays.
back with you? Do you have lobster?
It's in the igloo cooler at the desk
Igloo
just across the hall.
The Yeti cooler.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, that's how the kids do it. They bring the lobsters back from Maine.
Yeah, it's great. The Gura House orientation's great. Everybody just pulls out.
It's a staggered start. We got every kid in a different school. Doesn't start till Thursday.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to Texas. Can I make another shameless plug?
Yes.
Please.
Going to Texas this weekend for the Texas Tribune Festival. I'm going to interview the Treasury Secretary on stage in Austin. So I'll have some.
This will be Janet Yellen.
Janet Yellen for an
Gura.
hour on stage in Austin. I'll have some tape of that. Maybe I can come in Monday and play a little bit of that for you
Where's
as well.
this going to be? Austin.
Austin, Texas.
Are you just going for some,
I'll get some
fiddle
brisket.
thing?
No, rest assured, there'll be some brisket.
Janet
boots and all of
Yellen's at
that.
South by Southwest.
It's not South by Southwest. Now that would be we would get out the headline if that were the case.
that would be a headline.
No, Texas Tribune Festival.
Lisa,
but-
it was nice to see you
Tribune
today.
Festival,
Nice of you to
I mean,
drop
coming
by.
in. I mean,
Are you here
wow.
tomorrow?
Maybe.
Yes, she will be here tomorrow.
Oh, John answers unequivocally.
Yes.
Joining us now
We
in
need
the
more
studio,
seats in here.
Surveillance congestion correspondent. For those of you across the nation, in Boston and 92.9
Congestion
FM
pricing,
coming up
not-
here. I mean, John Tucker, come on. It's Labor
Sinus
Day.
related.
We're supposed to be deep into congestion pricing. Is it dead?
Well, let's put it this way. It's on hold. It could be on hold temporarily. It could be on hold permanently. But I also say the Governor Hochul, who put it on hold, either temporarily or permanently, she's taken a lot of flack for any number of things from Democrats.
That's a lot of money that was going to be.
It's over $1 billion a year in lost revenue.
Have they cut different projects?
Yeah,
Well,
repairs of all these stations, right?
What's that
I
now?
think a lot of subway station repairs have been on.
That's a lot of subway
You're a
stations
ferryman.
and-
I know you take the ferry, so.
I will do whatever I can to repair those subway stations.
David Gura, the big take. David Gura at the debate. Look for our
Thank you.
coverage there. John Tucker finally in at the crack of 9:55. 12 noon, Joe Matthew. Joe Matthew insisted we play Boston. 92.9 FM Boston. 12 noon today.